Council meeting of the 16th of January 2023. Just remind you that an audio recording of this meeting will be made for minute-taking purposes and will last the length of the open meeting. And the audio file will be available on the Council website when the minutes have been finalised. I'd like to welcome our elected members. We have no apologies. And I'd also like to welcome Nigel Morris, our Chief Executive, Matt Atkinson, Acting General Manager of Growth, Andy Baker, General Manager of Infrastructure, Trish Kirtland, Acting General Manager of Resources, Cash Hunt, Manager Communications and Business Services, Tanya Cregan, Executive Assistant to the Mayor and elected members, the members of the gallery, welcome to you. I'd also like to welcome Brian from the Fleurieu Sun, Georgina from the Southern Argus, and Matt from the Victor Harbour Times. It's good to see you all here. Alexandrina Council and its communities acknowledge the Narrandjeri people as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of our council district. I ask you all to please stand for the local government prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to grant Thy blessing upon the works of this council. Guide us in our deliberations for the advancement and the true welfare of the people of this district. Thank you very much. Just to remind elected members, if you have an interest in a matter before council, you're asked to disclose the interest to council and provide a full and accurate details of the relevant interest, and members are reminded to declare their interest before each item as it arises. Item 1 is the confirmation of our minutes of our meeting held on the 19th of December 2022. It's 23 in the agenda. 22. Is there a mover that they be moved? Councillor Maidman. Seconder, Councillor Miller. Any questions or discussion relating to those minutes? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 2 is adjourned debate. There is none. 3 is presentations and deputations. We have 3. The first one is 3.1 on heritage tourism, and Bronwyn Lewis would like to make a deputation regarding that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to take leave of the chamber. I'm still a little bit breathless from COVID and I can't speed this through in 5. I'll get to about 7 if the chamber would allow me that extra time.
Is that okay with everybody? Extra time? Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So last month my presentation was quite different to what it is tonight because you've got an agenda item that my previous paper would have led into. So your decision today is your legacy going forward. Tanya, do I just click this or, yep? So I just want to go over the good decision-making process as per the Australian Institute of Company Directors. You need to lay out the problem, you need to define the objectives, you need to evaluate the objectives against criteria and get to number 6 where you're at now, which is monitor and change if necessary. Changing from Plan B to Plan D on Goolwa Wharf. None of these are fully funded and council will be required to... Oh, sorry, my watch is talking to me. So you're going to have to draw down in debt regardless, and you're really clearly at the monitor and change the stage of your decisions. You have a fiscal responsibility to your ratepayers. You need to go back to the LGA Act criteria and look at existing assets. Look at the shelf life of the assets that you're approving, and on average that's about 30 years. So many of you had back to basics as your election promises, and that means maintaining existing assets. Council has a legal responsibility to maintain these assets, and if you look at that photo there that was in today's agenda, I'm gobsmacked that we're this far down the process and we're suddenly seeing this kind of repair and damage. Council needs to cover off its legal obligations, and we need to provide an OH&S background for our volunteers, our visitors and our staff. So if you go to page 145 of your agenda, it also talks about poor asset management can lead to deteriorating or failing assets. And this is, and this is where the financial burden has got today. We have left the Wharf for so long that we are now in the stage of a huge cost. But your decision tonight is about in 30 years' time. What you build today will need maintenance. Where will the funds come from? Imagine it's 2052. Some of us won't be here, but our children and grandchildren will be. What will the state and federal government fund? This is where your choice becomes simple. You need to protect assets that will continue to get funding. So last month I did a whole lot of very academic stuff, which you'll probably be pleased that you're not being bored with, but research shows that visitors to heritage sites are usually better educated, bigger spenders, travel in groups, and have on average better incomes. Heritage also creates and strengthens social relations, values, and meaning about people's past and present. That is why the state government went straight away to preserve the PS Marriott in the flood preparedness at Manham. So we're gathering criteria to make a good decision. Based on the research, every dollar that you spend on heritage tourism has a $1.68 return on investment. What you are really lacking, to inform you, is a piece of work around the museum area of the Wharf. We have an application in for a World Heritage listing, and if that happens, that can bring a lot of economic development. Council also has a wooden boat strategy, and I'm not going to read all that to you. You can read it yourself, and you have approved it. But it's basically about developing the wooden boat history around this area. So continuing on gathering the criteria to make a good decision, if you were going to invest in a building, a return on investment over 30 years, and I've got the calculation there and I will send the PowerPoint to all the elected members afterwards, you need 60 grand a year minimum to be covering off that asset over a 30-year period. So if your lease is not up there, you need to justify this to your ratepayers. A tenancy such as a museum has a return on investment. Think about what you're investing in. So this month's design has got the Oscar W at the end where they don't want to be, and the tenancy at the other end. We don't know who that tenancy is. The current tenancy expires in November, and based on my figures just then, if you're going to spend $1 million on that tenancy, you need to get 60 grand's worth of income. Otherwise, we, the ratepayers, will be asking why. So my suggestion is to think about flipping. You don't have to decide tonight. Just leave point 3 until a museum has been researched. Museums are an industry of the future. The City of Adelaide has invested $20 million over 30 years, and they have created 3,000 jobs in this environment, and they are very proud on their return of $1.68. The other thing that you need to think about with museums is they're not the old staid museums, all dusty, that we used to go to when we were school kids. They are now digital, interactive environments. So when we're looking at developing a revitalised riverboat centre, you reference this in the signal point information in the agenda, but you need to be looking at how that interpretation is going to happen. But what's really missing is who's going to be running it. You know, we've got storytelling, we've got invite the visitors to become more active, but you're missing this powerful bit of information about the museum quality. Now, if you look at the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney, when that first started, it was a dodgy old shed. yeah, it's 40 years on, but I remember that opening and everybody going, well, they're going to have to turn the exhibits over pretty quickly, and they did, and it's now a state-of-the-art museum where people are attracted. If you are thinking about 30 years' time, if you're thinking about your legacy, you have to look at best practice. So best practice in waterfront museums happens to be in South Wales at Swansea, at the National Waterfront Museum. And look, it's not too dissimilar from the sheds of Oscar W. So, printer didn't print the next bit. So what's missing? What's missing is there's no professional museum analysis. Before you decide who is going where, oh, thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Who is going where? You need to gather the right information. Don't rush one of the most critical decisions you'll make as a councillor. Yes, the funding is based on tenancies, but they are not defined. They need to have a return on investment, either financially or culturally. It's your responsibility to make sure it's either financial or cultural. Let's look at the gathered criteria. Federal, state and local governments support heritage tourism. Council has an adopted strategy. Council needs any commercial property to have a return on investment. And Council needs to provide a safe occupational health and safety working place for its volunteers. And don't forget, heritage tourism is a powerful economic driver. So what do we want you to consider? Well, clearly I'm here because I think you should be putting Oscar W at the front of the Wharf development. But I'm also suggesting that you defer point 3 in agenda item 8.1 until you've had advice. The renovation can start, but the tenancies inside, you really need to be clear that you're going down the right economic path. The development of an interactive collection space and visitor information centre 7 days a week with best practice museum input. Look at the Manham example. When a crisis presents, significant artefacts and history are front of mind. But you too need to have a look at good fiscal and investment strategy. Is there a business case for building hospitality venues? It might be. It might be that you can get 60 grand a year rent from that property and still drive economic development. You also have to consider the World Heritage possibilities that are in the mix. They're not through yet, but it's also your chance to have a legacy you're proud of. It's your legacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Any questions? Anybody? No? So thank you very much for that one. So 3.2 is also a deputation from Bronwyn. It's regarding a project using waste matter as a circular economy and housing infrastructure initiative. So that one, how much do you...
Oh, that one was 5 minutes, 20 seconds, depending on the video. So hopefully I should be through. So the second presentation I'm doing for you today is about using recyclable materials to build houses. So it's about creating an industry for the Fleurieu. It's about saving the planet. It's about dealing with a burgeoning issue, which is homelessness. And it's about making money for councils. So how did I get here? Prior to moving to the Fleurieu in 2007, I spoke at the World Economic Forum on the homeless women situation that we are currently experiencing. In 2020, the Homeless Forum at Kyneton Rocks, Rex Keeley and I attended from Alexandrina Council, and at that I was approached by several people and I joined the Fleurieu Foundation Committee for Homelessness. In 2021, I created the Fleurieu Affordable Housing Committee with Malangan District's Community Centre, Junction Housing, Alexandrina Council, Anglican Church and private investors, landlords and builders on board. So Alexandrina's history. Prior to the last term, and I found this out as a result of the process, Junction Australia Community Housing Regeneration was supported with a delegation to staff to determine the qualifying development applications. So that meant that in social housing, Matt Atkinson, who is the planner, could determine smaller houses and more on blocks. It's really critical when you're looking at housing. In 2021, we had our first meeting and Alexandrina staff were present. And with our last meeting, the staff could not attend because of caretaker mode, and we had it in November. And MADCA was left to investigate becoming a housing provider. They've since decided not to go down that route. Also in October, Councillor Scott asked administration to continue to investigate options with respect to affordable housing in the area. So we're three independent people wanting to make a difference. John Nicoladis, he's a builder with over 30 years construction background, mostly in Greece and Germany. He's been at the forefront of 3D printing of houses. He works in civil construction and is quite frankly an awesome entrepreneur. Doriana Corder, who is an urban designer, has worked in 12 countries across Asia and the Middle East, and she's delivered projects with cross-cultural teams. She's really familiar with international building codes, and obviously because she trained here in Australia, she understands all the building codes and complex stakeholder management. And me, I've got 20 years lecturing at postgraduate level in entrepreneurship, and I know how to define an opportunity. I've represented Australia in conferences all over the world. So in November 21, I went to Melbourne and I saw our little friend, the robot, and the gantry now in situ at Swinburne University. So if you're driving past Swinburne anytime soon, you can look in the window and see exactly that. It's not about selling concrete, it's about a market product that meets our customers. And this is where we started with John from Slick Build. So these are what the walls look like. Some of you might have seen the block. He printed a cabana in the block. Now, hopefully, we'll be able to... no, it's not. Tanya, is it working on yours, the video? Okay. Sorry, I can send you the video separately. So what it shows you is this is the printing of the walls, and what we're looking at is components like this. So you can see where the wet cement has come, and one of the reasons why printing in 3D is so good as opposed to cast cement building when it's flat on the ground, the cement dries and the integrity is not damaged by moving it up. So when you bring it from flat to horizontal, vertical, the cement's compromised. Whereas this way it dries in situ, and you can make modulars that can be clicked into each other. My ideal is to print on site because you can print a 4-bedroom house in 4 days. The problem is the gantry is €1.4 million, so we won't be doing that just yet. So in December, I met with John from Slick Build and Doriana again, and this was the eureka moment. That grey stuff in front of you is recycled cement and plastic printed in a 3D printer. So we know that Fleurieu waste has about 8,000 tonnes of building materials recycled each year. So just keep that in the back of your mind as I go through the rest. So it was a eureka moment for me because I'm always looking for recycling projects, and Green Industries has a grant that equals an opportunity. So I met with Matt after the roundtable on housing, met with the State Director of Affordable Housing, met with Business Victor Harbour, because it can't come from 3 individuals, it has to come from a community to be able to get this thing off the ground. And Business Victor Harbour are really keen to see this and it's as an industry for the Fleurieu. So what is needed is your imprimatur. You bring your ideas and your contacts to our next affordable housing meeting. And if you've got any questions about it, now's the time to ask. I'm going to Yankulit and KI council meetings tomorrow, and then Victor Harbour next week. All 4 councils and Fleurieu Waste are informed about what we're doing, and we're looking at how we can solve both the recycling problem that we have, and we know that there's been problems with the recycled cement here in Alexandrina, and also affordable housing that we can click together in modules. And just yesterday, Peter Malanukas announced that all products for new social housing had to be made in South Australia. So my eyes lit up. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions from Councillor Nicholson? Yeah.
So the 3D printer.
You need to use the mic.
Sorry, Rose.
Sorry.
So the 3D printer that can print the layers of cement can be moved on location to a block.
Yes. So the gantry that was in there, that gantry which is holding it, the house can be built on site with the robot. That little robot at the beginning. So that little robot holds the printer. And that can fit on the back of a trailer. So all you need is the right aggregate of cement and plastic mixed on site to be pumped through it. And that's what the proof of concept test will test. So we know it works because we've done it. But now we need to work out how good it is, the thermal dynamics of the product, so that we are building affordable housing, not just as cheap builds, but as affordable going forward for the people living in them.
Councillor Kerman.
Thanks for your presentation, Bron. I'm just wondering, it sounds like a very exciting project. In terms of affordable housing, are you looking at actually establishing an estate of some sort, like the land estate, and building it? Are you looking to integrate with existing housing? What sort of thinking do you have there?
Okay, so originally when we were starting to talk with Malang Community Centre about them becoming a housing provider, Matt and Penny Wallen from Council had identified some land in Malang that has the potential to have affordable housing, and it's also owned by SA Housing Trust, so that's why I spoke to the director. We would love the opportunity to prove the concept in quick build, but the reality is to build this industry, so John is a classic entrepreneur. He's like, come on, let's just give us a block of land and we'll do it. Whereas I know for councils, for government to be involved, we have to go through the criteria, we have to, prove the concept, but also put up a really good business case. I don't think that it will need any money from local government or state government. I think that it will happen. Boral have underwritten the 3D printing, and Alex Fraser's and Hanson are looking at the recycling, underwriting that. So I think that once we've got all the ducks lined up, but I think in order to do that and to get the community to come along, we need to go through a process that people can be part of, like this. I see this as a stakeholder information, really. Be great if we have your imprimatur so that when we put in our grant, we've got all 4 councils happy for us to be looking at it. We're not asking for anything else, but it's about really disrupting the building industry because it is so much cheaper to build. And that's what innovation's about.
Thank you.
Councillor Thornton.
I just wonder, is there anyone in Australia who's living in one of these at the moment? Like, have you had any feedback?
Well, they did the cabana on the block in Massenden, and there's some projects being done. This is with 3D printing of cement, but not with the recycled. Nobody's looking at the recycled yet. This is a really unique opportunity. And it's unique because all the intellectual property is in John's head around the aggregate and the combination. But he has, if you go to Slick Build website, there's plenty of houses that he's built overseas. New South Wales Government, Homes Victoria, they had a huge village that they'd lined up to do last year, and they put it on hold during the election period, and that's still waiting. State government, it could take another couple of years, but the idea is, and I've actually got the plans for those houses that are going to go into Victoria that are all 3D printed. The other thing that it brings to the area, because if you're doing the frame, you have the slab and the steel frame or the wood frame or whatever, all the kitchen units, all the tiling, all that sort of stuff is industry bringing young people down to the Fleurieu as well. So if we're going to be making those modules in Malang or in Goolwa or whatever. We're going to be building those modular kitchens to go into the modular houses. And they're not ugly, and that's why I got Doriana involved, because she's such a creative architect. You don't have to look crappy to be cheap. It's really, you know, she's really determined to make this a beautiful environment that won't become a ghetto. It'll become something that we can be proud of.
Any further questions? Councillor Kermans,
Yeah, just a quick one. I'm just wondering, this seems to be a reasonably new concept in Australia, and we do have building regulations and things like that. Does it meet all of the aspects of that?
And this time last year I would have said no, but because they've been working, it's NATA, the National Australia, Matt will know what the rest stands for, but there is the whole criteria around, it's a national code, so getting it signed off in New South Wales or Victoria first, and that's what I've kind of been sitting on, waiting for one of those big projects so that we didn't get burnt being the guinea pig. So I've been waiting for one of those to go live. So Boral is working with John on the New South Wales Government Housing Project, and then he's working with Alex Fraser and Hanson, I believe, I might have it the other way around, in the Victorian Government one. But both of them are meeting the national standards.
any further questions? Thanks very much, Bronwyn.
Thank you.
So 3.3 is a deputation from Rose Kentish from Middleton on behalf of the Storm Disaster Group of Middleton. Rose, would you like to come up? Yeah.
My name is Rose Kentish. I'm a resident and business owner in Middleton. I'm a member of the Middleton Storm Disaster Group and stand before you today as a representative of the Alexandrina residential and business ratepayers that have been very deeply affected by the storm event on Saturday, the 12th of November 2022. On the 12th of November, Middleton experienced the largest natural disaster in living history. This disaster happened 66 days ago. However, the Middleton community remains in high trauma. Affected residents and businesses are still at the beginning of their clean-up, dealing with insurers, trying to understand what happened, why it happened, which agencies arrived to help and which did not ever arrive. And most importantly, what are we going to do as a community to mitigate the risk of this happening again? Because it will happen again. A number of you may not really be aware of the extreme event that day. Even residents in Middleton were unaware of the incredible disaster their neighbours were experiencing. So we'd like to share some video footage with you now.
It hasn't gone up. Like,
No, that. Come on, get in the cars. Alright,
we're ready to go. Alright, let's go. Get in the car. Look at all this water! Hurry, go! Harrison, what are you doing? Hurry, go! Oh my god! Look, the bin's gone! Oh my god!
We are bringing this to Council's attention because we believe you have a duty of care for your community, and you can help your community to understand what happened and why, to assist in its recovery, to ensure all has been done by the right agencies, to make sure we're a stronger community as a result. And as a stronger community, that we have and are doing everything we can to mitigate against a repeat disaster. The Middleton Storm Disaster Group has been formed to represent the Alexandrina ratepayers, both residential and business, affected by the storm. We aim to know the findings of the events that took place in Middleton on November 12th, to understand the causes of the large amounts of water that entered the township, and to know what steps are being taken to mitigate future water inundation of our homes and our businesses in Middleton. We are urgently asking, we are insisting for a moderated public forum this month where questions can be asked and answers can be given by the relevant agencies. We ask you, our elected members, to hear us, to help us, to believe that a stronger, more vibrant community only comes from boldness of action. The Council has a responsibility to its ratepayers, and the lack of action from our council has angered our community, left us feeling deeply unhappy with the lack of action or even interest from our council. Who wants to live, work or pay rates to a council who does not act, who does not show their duty of care, who does not honour its responsibilities? We all need answers, and then, only then, can we all work together to build a more resilient community to live, work and play. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Anybody got any questions? Anyone? Councillor Gardner?
It's not a question, Rose. I just want to say that on the morning after, I was speaking with Councillor Scott, and he told me about the flood. And so I put my galoshes on and found a pair of rubber gloves and put my very oldest clothes on and drove to Mill Terrace, and I had no idea what I could do, but I parked outside the mill, and the gates were open and there was furniture being chucked outside, and I don't think I've ever experienced anything like it. I spent the entire day throwing out furniture from the mill and mopping water from the basement, and then going out to the shed and realising that 5 feet of water had gone through the shed and everything in that shed was ruined. We didn't have water, so we couldn't wash the plates from the kitchen, and so we stacked up the plates with mud on them outside and put them on a table. There were lots of people there, lots of young people who were helping. And since then, I guess I got home about 4:30. I got home about 4:30, so I was there from about 10:30 in the morning. Someone came with a barbecue and gave us sausages and bread, wrapped in bread, and I don't think anybody did anything except work all day. We hardly talked. We just worked from one place to another, and I can say with sincerity, I have never in my life seen such a disaster. I've never been involved with a flood before. I've seen things on television, but you don't actually get the extent of the enormity of the damage. Now, my place is fine, thank you very much. I'm in Goolwa. But since that day, I haven't stopped thinking about the mill, because I keep thinking of the hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage that was just done to one place. I rang Janice Haynes from Rose Cottage and just checked to see how she went. And I think it's due to Janice, isn't it? That's really brought you all together, because she bothered me for quite a long time with texts, more texts than I care to actually think about. What I guess I really want to say, Rose, is that the council actually does care. And I know Michael Scott spent many hours helping out in the surf shop and going around and seeing people. I think one of the things that we've been struggling with is that it has been a silent flood. And even people who we didn't know about were flooded. I understand there was a couple of women behind the mill whose places were affected, and they didn't actually know about what the council was doing. So I guess I want to stand up for the council, Rose, because I think we have done a lot. Perhaps not in the way that you're talking about now. And I have lobbied for a meeting, and I'm very, very grateful to you people in Middleton, because I know when you have a disaster, it's almost impossible to think about anything else. So where you've gathered your energy, I'm not really sure. But we are supporting you, and we are with you, and if I can do any more to help, then I would. I'm not sure that I can, but I just want you to know we do care.
Further, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. Rose, great effort by a great community in the response. I was amazed to see what I saw. You speak of a lack of action by council and other agencies. Could you please clarify what they could have done better in your mind?
So the fact that it's been 66 days and we're standing before you still trying to understand what happened and why it happened, and where some of the agencies were that we believe should have arrived, should have been there to help us in deep distress. So for example, I called 000 at 5:30 from the mill on Saturday night, and we ended up getting some help from the Metropolitan Fire Service because of a personal call made from within the service to help us on Sunday afternoon to do a specific job to pump out our swimming pool. We had 1.6 metres of water in depth on our property. So as Margaret said, because Margaret knows, because Margaret was one of the people helping the 70 people that arrived to our place, 50 of which we'd never met before and are forever grateful, to get rid of the mud and sludge. Now, the expectation is not that council will come in with their spades and their wheelbarrows, although such appreciation for people that did help. Such appreciation, that is a community response that shows strength in a community. But what we're asking for is to understand together what happened, why it happened, what agencies showed, which ones didn't, how we could do it better. Because if we have another big storm, and we will have another big storm, that water was not going down into the ground anymore. That water was running off the ground and off the hills and straight down Flagstaff Hill Road, straight down into the caravan park, into our place, the mill, into the medical centre, into the caravan park, into the surf shop, into the general store and the pharmacy. I mean, it was a 200-metre devastational river that suddenly arrived and was gone an hour later. And a lot of us are not going to get insurance because insurers are hiding behind the idea that it's a flood, not a storm. But we were all under that cloud. We all knew that that was a storm, and the water just couldn't go down into the ground anymore because it's been so wet. So our request is not, we are not standing here saying, Council, you've done nothing. We're saying, come help us. Come and help us. There is so much that can be done now because there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of trauma that can be calmed and resolved and helped with Council helping us to understand what happened and to mitigate it from happening again. So looking at the infrastructure and the roads, the culverts, looking at what happened, why, and how we can stop it, or at least reduce the huge impact of it happening again, because I don't want my home to be 1.6 metres under the ground. We've lost a huge amount of personal belongings that we will never recover. And no one died, thank goodness. But I never want to experience that again, and we all need help as a community to make sure people don't leave in case it happens again, that they feel safe to stay because they know their council has helped to stop that level of devastation happening again. Because we believe a big part of it was that the infrastructure that's there didn't cope with the amount of water that ran down that hill from that huge storm cloud on that day. And we're here asking for help.
Any further? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Rose, for your email that you sent earlier in bringing to our attention that you had corresponded with Council. I'm very interested in the response that you received to your questions. I think they were excellent questions, and I'm sure that all of us here, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think we're all very interested to see the answers to those questions, and I guess to understand why it happened and what Council's role is and who the agencies are. I think that will be of great benefit. So it would be a very traumatic experience to go through, and I look forward to seeing the administration's response to you. So thank you for coming tonight.
Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Rose. I'd like to commend your strength in getting through the flood and then in rallying in the 66 days that have followed to advocate for your community and stand here tonight and speak about it. I think it must be very hard, so you're very strong. I think it's easy to see here in the chamber that our community of Middleton is reaching out for support. You have questions and suggestions following the flood, one of the biggest natural disasters on the Fleurieu in recent history. I'd like us to show up and keep up with the needs of our local residents in Middleton as the full impact of the flood continues to unfold. And as you said, it's just at its beginning. I'd like to ask about counselling for members who've really borne the brunt of the impacts of the flood. Between you privately, have there been any resources shared about counselling, or is that something that you would benefit from receiving?
I know that, and it's difficult for me to speak for others, but I've heard a lot of stories and from people that there was about 28 houses and businesses affected, deeply affected. There's been a lot of loss, so there's a lot of grief. And there's a lot of weariness. We're all pretty exhausted, which is actually probably why it's taken us so long to come and stand in front of you today, because we've been scrubbing and cleaning and sorting and dealing with that level of grief for the last 66 days, and it will keep going, and working with our insurers where that's relevant, working on the fact that they'd like to call it a flood and not cover us rather than a storm, and show up and help. So these are issues that we're dealing with. I think each of us are doing the best we can to work on our own mental health. And I think that whether we visited our doctor or got some help from a counsellor or gone and stood and listened to the waves and the water and tried to reframe the sound of water as a positive thing. There's all sorts of things that you wouldn't believe, and we're all pretty strong individuals, strong humans, and we obviously love the water and want to live down here, but it's a pretty incredible force. It's up there with fire and all sorts of other natural disasters, and usually there's a big response plan from the community to help people who've been through this, and we haven't seen much, and we'd love to see something. And that's why we're here, and I think we've clearly articulated how we think it will help. And I really personally believe that with action and with seeing our community come together and help us answer the questions, that will help us to rebuild our mental health. I have to say that Steve, our local policeman, came back, I think it was the Thursday after the storm, because in South Australia, and I didn't know this, but apparently sometimes you can have a repeat occurrence of a weather experience 7 days later in South Australia. I didn't know that. So he came and saw my husband Sam and I directly, and a number of other people, but not everyone, who'd been affected, and told us that it may happen again. The predicted weather pattern looked exactly the same as the day of the storm for the following Saturday. So it gave us a chance to at least sandbag and prepare ourselves, and he talked about that triggering and how that might feel. But I do know that not everyone heard about that or understood that or could prepare for that. So I think it's going to be ongoing, but I do think, again, with the feeling of strength from our community and doing something about it is going to make all the difference. Thanks, Lou.
Any further questions? I think Rose has given us a pretty good picture of just how rotten it was, for sure. And we had a meeting with Nigel and I met with Rose and Janice, and we are working on getting that meeting set up for you, so definitely under control. So thanks very much, Rose, for your presentation.
Thanks, Keith.
So item 4 is petitions. 4.1 is a petition regarding the Middleton flood event from the 12th of November 2022. There's a recommendation that we receive that petition and that our CEO continues, as just mentioned, arranging that meeting. So is there a mover for that? Move Councillor Nicholson. Seconder, Councillor Coomans. Any discussion regarding that? So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 5 is questions with notice. There are quite a number of them. So I'll just go through the headings. 5.1 is the question from Councillor Maidment regarding transport options. 5.2 is Councillor Miller regarding support for non-council owned community halls and recreation grounds. Councillor Miller regarding the zoning of land in Langbourne Creek. 5.4 is Councillor Miller regarding a submission to the Select Committee on Public and Active Transport in the Commonwealth Home Support Program. And Councillor Miller on the Open Space Program and Pocket Parks. Councillor Miller regarding support for gymnasiums in Strathalbyn. Councillor Miller regarding Lot 5 Hampden Way, Strathalbyn, the next steps. Councillor Nicholson regarding the pedestrian walkthroughs at Middleton and the status update. Councillor Nicholson regarding speed limits and recreational use on our local waterways. Councillor Nicholson regarding Council's position on public recycling bins. Councillor Nicholson regarding the installation of bike racks in Middleton, just a status update. And Councillor Nicholson regarding upgraded toilets and the installation of outdoor showers at Horseshoe Bay. Councillor Nicholson regarding Australian Local Government Women's Association South Australian representative. Councillor Maidment regarding the Strathalbyn swimming pool and an extension of the season. Councillor Maidment regarding food and organics, otherwise known as FOGO service in Ashbourne. That's the questions with notice. All the questions and all the answers are in the agenda. So you could That's all there. Item 6 is questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Scott.
Yes, Your Worship. I think I've raised this before. It was probably quite a few years ago. The matter of the disposal of dead kangaroos on our roads. There is an increasing number of deaths amongst the kangaroo population, at great cost to motorists, I might add, but that's another matter. And the poor things finish up on the side of the road, and then mysteriously they finish up with a white or a red cross on them, or a yellow cross, and they stay there. Now, I know there are a lot of them, but they are part of our national symbol, and no, if we left a sheep on the side of the road or a cow on the side of the road, we'd be very quickly pulled into gear by someone, compliance in the council. And yet these lie on our tourist roads until they rot away and blow away with the next sum of north wind. Now, I'm asking, can someone goes there and touches that animal, dead animal. Now, to me, they immediately have a responsibility for the disposal of that animal, because they've touched it, they've taken possession of it, because they've put a label on it, whoever's doing it. Now, I'm suggesting that the person that does that removes the animal. Now, they're not easy to move, so I'm suggesting that a trailer be available to those people with a crane on the side of which you can buy for a couple $100. And they put the thing onto a sling, winch it up, fling it into the trailer and drive away with it. So we don't have rotting kangaroos and the smell of them on our major and minor roads at any time, let alone during tourism time.
Any further questions? We'll take that one now. Councillor Coomans.
Funny we should be mentioning kangaroos, because last Saturday night there was an amount of culling occurring on the Mount Compass golf course, and I'm wondering, are there regulations, policies that council has in relation to providing notification to the neighbourhood about this happening? Does create quite a bit of concern that you have the animal rights who are looking at not doing that, not culling kangaroos, and of course you've got others who say it's a good thing because it prevents the very thing that Councillor Scott was just talking about having dead animals on the main roads. What's council's position in that sort of activity?
Through the Chair, just to respond on a couple of items there. What you're finding is when they're getting the cross on it, that's just to indicate that someone's gone and checked whether there's a joey in the pouch, so that not everyone stops and checks it. So I think that's why the marking's on it. I think a lot of the time what you're seeing is kangaroos on the side of the state government roads where they pick it up. I wouldn't be encouraging residents to go and pick up kangaroos on the side of the road. We of course pick up kangaroos on the side of our roads. As far as culling goes, again, that's the state government does that one. We don't authorise the culling. That will be through the state. Often when we know about it, we'll let the neighbourhood know, but also the state government will also notify those surrounding that culling is going to be occurring at the same time.
Any further questions? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. Just very quickly, I in November did a twilight cruise on the Oscar W, and it was absolutely amazing. But I just wondered, is the risk evaluation done every time the Oscar W goes out to just, like the weather and conditions and those sorts of, just a quick, when there's an event, most people do a risk evaluation of the environment and anything like that. And I'm assuming that they do. And when council's liaising with the Oscar W and negotiating, who is it that they actually liaise with? Do they have a public officer, or is it the secretary, or is it the president? I'm just trying to understand who the person is whose council contact is. Thank you.
Through the chair, there is a risk evaluation which needs to occur prior to them going out each time. And the second half of the question is when we liaise with them, often we'll meet with the committee, which consists of, I think, around 3 people, or sometimes we'll meet with the whole Friends of Oscar W as well.
Any further questions? If not, we'll move on to item 7, which is notice of motions. 7.1 is a notice of motion from Councillor Miller regarding Lot 10, Langhorne Creek, Strathalbyn, the business case. There's a motion there before you. Councillor Miller, you wish to move it, obviously. Would you like to speak to it?
I don't have anything really to add to what's written there in the agenda, except to say that the Strathalbyn Basketball Club have lost access to the Tyndale Stadium that they've been able to use as a second court. So the reality is there's one basketball court in Strathalbyn for everyone to use for training, games, competition. So I really think that this is just the missing piece to assist everyone move forward and have some clarity on exactly what the what, the why, the how, the when. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Nicholson. Is there any discussion? Councillor Maidment.
Yes, I've sweated over this for probably 11 years now. We got it to a point where we convinced the council to allocate this funding so that the site could be activated, and that's basically what the 100,000 is for. To divert it to a business case that gives consideration to the needs analysis community. I thought we're working through that with the Lot 10 group in time. There's been notional costs on budgets, and you won't get an agreement on a management model. You can't even get one on the Goolwa Oval. Where the funding is going to come from, community benefit. And realistically, the Harness Club are still in the mix. They've had recent meetings with council officers, and they are coming to this council with a proposal in February. So I'd like to move a formal motion that this be left on the table. Not opposing it in its entirety, I think it's just too soon.
So it's a formal motion that lay on the table. It will take it as a formal motion that you're moving it, but in future it can't. On a formal motion, there's no preamble, no discussion. It's a formal motion. So I've said that you move it. Is there a seconder for the formal motion?
I have a point of order here, Your Worship, for the reasons that you've just said. Councillor Maidment's just debated pretty much, and now he's moving that it be adjourned.
So, yeah, it really is.
It's all it's calling for is a report. It's not asking. It's asking for a report to consider the merits of doing such a thing. It's not diverting anything, and it doesn't matter what the Harness Racing Club's doing.
But you should just call a point of order, because that's what it is. It's a procedural problem. So that's fair enough. So I accept the fact that had you wanted a formal motion, you should have just moved the formal motion, let it lay on the table, and not talk to it. So is there any further discussion? No. Any further discussion? Microphone? No. So I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour?
Mayor Parker, I'm a bit lost. Are we voting on a formal motion?
No. No, we didn't allow the formal motion, but as Councillor Miller explained, and as I was going to allow, but it really is inappropriate to allow it. So we've got it moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Maidment has spoken to it, and so there's nobody else. So I'll put. Hang on, you right? Yeah. I was going to make some comments. Okay.
Look, I support this motion that we need to look at a business case. But I guess for many years I've been banging on about the actual location of the Lot 10 Langhorne Creek. The fact that it's in a well-established family housing area, there's much commercial, industrial and infrastructure there, and all of the development of new family housing and the like is all happening at the other end of town. So I just wonder whether this business case should really include having a look at the actual location as well. And I guess I can only ask the mover and seconder if they're prepared to accept a variation that we include looking at the actual location. Because bottom line is we're actually looking at, one of the quotes was between $30 and $50 million of work on this over the years. And I reckon we ought to get the location of it right. And I think if we're going to look at a business case, that should be one of the parts that we look at. So if the mover and seconder are prepared to accept that as a variation, I'd like that included, please.
Nigel clarify. I mean, a business, as Nigel said, there's a number of things. We don't have any alternate land of this size available in the area that we could look at. And the business case would look at all those aspects of it, whether it's viable, whether it's the right place, and all those things about it. But we are, and we can't go into the detail because it's, but we are progressing in discussion with the Harness Racing Club as one of the main financiers of this project, and that their intention is to put a submission to council. So as soon as we get that, I think that everything about this land will be a lot clearer, but let's hope it goes the right way. But yeah, I hope that answers you, sort of, Councillor Scott.
I'd just like to add that I did go to one of the meetings and sat through just to inform myself of how it was all going, and I think the first thing the second thing in number 2 of the motion that says consideration to a needs analysis, I felt there was a lot of uncertainty about what was needed and where, and I certainly would like to I think that needs to be really clarified before we talk about what's going to happen at Lot 10, because it's no use building something that they won't come to, or it's not workable or whatever. So I think the needs analysis above all is terribly important for us to, before we go anywhere else with it.
Councillor Coombs, you've sort of spoken to it. Yeah.
Look, could you just clarify, please, that what I asked in terms of a location will form part of the A report?
Through the Chair, what the motion is asking for is that we bring back a report in March to go down the line of the business case. What I'll be recommending in the report that comes back in March is to have a look at various areas, including whether it's viable, and it will also be looking to see is it the best place. And this is why it's not just a quick analysis to come back in March. It's calling for a full-on business case to have a look at all aspects. So you wouldn't have a look at spending all that money at a block of land without determining whether it's the most logical place to do it, or if there's alternative locations, or even where the city's growing at the time. So it will answer what you're looking for.
Any further questions or discussion? Did you wish to sum up, Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Worship. This has been going on for so long, and there is no business case. There is no analysis of rec and sport needs in Strathalbyn. I just think the logical next step, there's been consultation. If you took a project management approach and managed gateways from concept through to actually doing work, you need a business case for the reasons that other council members have touched on. That business case would also include the merits of a harness racing club, or any club really, being involved in that side or on that side. It would look at governance models. It really is not. It's related, but it's separate to whatever the harness racing club wants to, whether they want to be part of it or not. A business case that looks at needs analysis would capture that. So I think it's very separate to whatever plans the harness racing club have. Mind you, we have a resolution of $100,000 that has not been spent and is going nowhere because we are waiting for a formal position from the harness racing club. So I don't think it's fair that a needs analysis or a report that looks at having at least establishing that happens, because we're waiting on them to make a decision. I think it's completely irrelevant and unrelated to a degree. Thank you.
That closes the discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Item 7.2 is a notice of motion from Councillor Nicholson regarding the Australian Local Government Women's Association International Women's Day event of 2023 themed Cracking the Code, Innovations as a Gender Issue. And there's a motion there by Councillor Nicholson. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Your Worship. Wednesday, March 8th is International Women's Day. Equality in every form benefits us all at the individual, social and economic levels. International Women's Day events are an important marker of our commitment to combating discrimination and marginalisation of women locally and internationally. This motion seeks support from Council of up to $800 to support a local event that has occurred 2 years in a row on the Fleurieu and has been really successful, and I hope the Chamber will support it. Thank you.
And do we have a seconder, Councillor Coomans?
If I could speak?
Yep.
Thank you. Look, I support this motion. I think it's a great idea. I've attended previous ones, and I think it's a great community event. I particularly like the fact that we might be sponsoring some students, and I think that's good as well. And I like the last bit where there is some gender balance in the motion, and there is also a men's function in November, and that's been asked to be supported in a similar way. So I think I'd certainly support this one.
Any further discussion? Councillor Scott.
I'll echo some of those comments, if I may. I've been involved or as an attendee of the previous years. They've been very well run, informative, interesting, and I too like the idea of us supporting some students. And when we say high school, I mean I would like to think that is secondary school and would include some of the colleges here. And I think it's appropriate that council support them and sponsor them. I've sponsored in the beginning a couple, and but I think it's fair that the council do that on behalf of the community, because it is a community-based thing. So I look forward to it. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Do you wish to speak to it again? No. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 7.3 is a motion from Councillor Nicholson regarding reserve cleaning for peak season periods across the Alexandrina Council. It's moved by Councillor Nicholson. Did you wish to speak to that one too?
Thank you, Your Worship. Over the summer period, the community of Port Elliot has battled with ongoing issues around waste collection at Horseshoe Bay, which has triggered, I suppose, a lot of ongoing conversation and throwing around ideas for how to manage that specific area in peak holiday times. This motion is looking at this issue across our whole council region and asking for advice from our regional waste authority about what we can do in the future to manage these peak times in our region, across the region, where potentially tourists are frequenting locations and inundating our rubbish bins. So it's simply requesting a report from FROA about possible avenues for managing our waste across the region through peak holiday seasons.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Coomans. Any discussion? We've done this before. Port Elliot, the problem with Horseshoe Bay, apart from being beautiful, is that it's so busy that to go during the day, the normal garbage truck can't get through the car park and can't pick the bins up safely. So in the past, last year we did it, we had a utility vehicle go 3 times, I think, during the day with clean bins and drop them off and pick up the full ones, and that gets rid of the rubbish but also leaves clean bins there. And because it's much better than, nothing worse than, we don't want to put a row of a dozen bins, it looks terrible. And as we've heard, quite often you might have 3 bins and the two on the sides are full and the middle one's got nothing in it. So people are strange about how they put stuff in bins. But, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. So, item 8 is administration reports, and 8.1 is quite a lengthy one. It's the Goolwa Wharf Precinct Revitalisation project, an absolutely major project, and there are 12 dot points. I suggest to you that we go through them individually. Are you all happy to do that rather than do it en bloc? Much better. Right, so we'll start with dot point 1, which is the recommendation before you. So is there a mover for that one first?
Can I just ask a question about it?
Question?
Is it possible to vary that to have a stage where we can consult with the people on the wharf, the tenants, to determine the exact best spot? There has been quite a bit of feedback since this idea came up a week ago that maybe that's not the best spot.
Through the Chair, the motion at the moment is talking about making one decision that the toilets are not in the wharf shed. The secondary part of it is to say that it goes in a named location. You could divide the motion into say that the toilets not be in the wharf shed, but the location to be determined at a future meeting, which
Yes,
will give
please.
you an opportunity to talk to some more people.
Yes, please.
So we can get that on the screen. Let's.
Yeah, sure.
Look, I just wonder, and there seems to be some differing opinions about the 12 recommendations, whether it's worthwhile actually adjourning the meeting for a short while we just have a general discussion about where people are thinking on a lot of these things, and then come back in a formal way and move the recommendations.
So if we could adjourn meeting procedures. So first of all, those in favour, could you please indicate if you're in favour of adjournment and a discussion? That's it? Nobody?
Are we deciding just on this one point? Or on
Yeah,
all of them?
No. We're talking about this item, adjourning meeting procedure to talk formally about this item, 8.1, which is the Wharf Precinct Revitalisation project. So we can adjourn it, or we can just carry on dot point by dot, doing each dot point as it comes up. So what do you, so those in favour of adjourning it while we discuss it, can you please show that you are?
Through you, Your Worship, do you mean just suspending meeting procedures?
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I said. So those in favour? Only 2. So are you in favour of, oh, right.
Would you be good enough to repeat what we're voting on, please? My apologies for...
We are talking about suspending meeting procedures and adjourning the discussion and to have an informal discussion about the Wharf Revitalisation project prior to going into the items. We'll do the whole, we'll be talking about the whole 12. Yeah. So we'll try it again. And I need 2/3 majority to do it, so have a think about it. So those in favour? How many? 6. That's only half. 2/3, isn't it? Yeah. Fine. Yeah, 2/3. Yep, that's okay. So we'll do it. That's 2/3. Now we've got 9, that's 2/3, 6. So we'll go, it's now just after 6:45, so we'll go till 7 o'clock. It's still treated as though we're in a meeting, but you're not considered to have spoken to the item. But, we still go through appropriate, when you want to speak, put your hand up sort of thing. Councillor Nicholson.
I'd like to speak to Peter's suggestion about Councillor Oliver's suggestion about the toilets. I think it's a difficult decision. I think it's a good decision to move the toilets out of the wharf shed. The difficult question is then, where do they go? We're faced with making the best of a bad situation here. There's nowhere, ideally, that you'd want to have the toilets, and they have to go somewhere. I think that the location that is indicated in the diagram does meet the needs of the area well. There is the downside that, yes, it does inhibit view to the water. It's going to be difficult to find a location where it doesn't. Where it is central to the businesses, the wharf shed, the markets, Signal Point Gallery, anybody who is down on the lawns, I think that's a good location. It's highly visible, it's accessible, and I think it's a good location. Time is money. The longer we go around and around thinking and talking and debating about where these things are, it's costing the ratepayers. So I can see that there are downsides, but I support the location where it is because there are a lot of positives.
Councillor Livingston.
Thank you, Mayor Parks. Just speaking to Councillor Oliver's recommendation for that one, I'd support the toilets coming out of the wharf shed. That expands the space within the wharf shed for the tenancies in there. The issue that I have with the toilets is that when you go down to the Wharf Precinct area and whatever direction that you're looking at to the distillery up to Signal Point from the wharf, you're going to be looking at a toilet block that's going to be interrupting the majority of the views. And for a decision to be made on that, I personally believe that we need to see the options before making a decision.
Any further questions? Anybody else? I mean, sort of, that's what the idea is to. The idea is to say that we acknowledge the fact that the toilets have got to come out of the shed, but the location is still to be determined, and the design, the aesthetics of the actual design. Hang on. Councillor Coomans first.
Thank you, Mayor Parks. Yeah, look, it's not an easy decision, but trying to work some other location where it's not going to be central to the activities that are occurring on the wharf, like the markets, the distillery, the activities in the wharf shed. It needs to be as low profile as possible, I think, so that it doesn't provide a visual barrier. But I was looking at the Victor Harbour toilets on the Esplanade in the Soldiers Memorial Gardens, and it's clad with sort of a corrugated material that's very much in keeping with what hopefully will be replacing the skin of the sheds, and they look okay. So the only issue I would have is let's keep the profile as low as possible, and what was the other point I was going to make? I forget. But it's not perfect, but I think it's the best. And I guess when you look at the pedestrian movement from the park to the wharf, they walk right past it. The trains that come in there, so it's sort of a convenient location, but it does have some issues. So I think it's probably where it should be.
It is indicative, but it also, as I said to Nigel, it's huge. You look at the size, it's not to scale, you look at the size of the wharf shed and look at the toilet, my goodness me, it's got half the shed. It's massive. Councillor Oliver, did you speak?
Apologies for my earlier interruption. I think this is the preferred position for me where it's located, thinking through, and I agree with the earlier points, but I do think that we do need to talk to the stakeholders because they haven't had their opportunity to say what they think, and we may not have considered their issues. So that's, my preferred position is where it is, but I think we should consult.
Could I just ask a question then? In terms of our timeline, is there enough time to consult, and to what extent do you consult? Are you looking at consulting with the interested groups or wider? I don't know.
Through the chair, I would look to ask for feedback of the tenants down there at the moment, and I'd present them to elected members for consideration, but I also understand that I probably need to present more options of where the toilets are currently located and list the pros and cons for different locations of how we came up with this end design, and you may go a different direction at that stage.
Question, what are the other possible locations for the toilets, and how did you get to the idea for them to be where they are on the diagram?
Through the chair, we looked at options which would make sure that the distillery occupants of the Wharf shed would meet their liquor licence requirements. There may be different locations, and I don't know them off the top of my head at the moment, and that's the exact reason why I need to bring back a further report. We did check in that location that it is before you that there was no services under the ground that we would be going into should we be building there, so that was an option there. We did actually talk about the possibility of joining it to the ticket box right on the front, but again that was something that we'd need to consult with the tenant there, and also that would also block the view. We did have a look at doing it over the railway, but then again you would have patrons that would be then going across the railway to get to there, and I also think that the distance requirements to the occupants were probably too far for that one as well. But we can bring back all those options and take you through the pros and cons of all of them.
Thank you for that. I just wonder if also we can consider things such as screening of the toilets and how they're clad to minimise any adverse view. It would be nice if you knew there was a toilet there, but you had the feeling that it belonged there, that it fitted in.
Following on from that, I think there's potential to get a local artist to do some artwork on the toilet, make it look nice, so it's not an ugly toilet.
I mean, I don't think we're talking about a slab block. There are national parks doing a lot of work throughout the state on their campsites. And I know they're doing quite a few, they've done some down the Coorong, but the nearest one to here that I've come across so far is Deep Creek. I'm thinking of the name of the beach now, but down in Deep Creek National Park, they've done a new public toilet set up at their campsite. It's absolutely beautiful. If a toilet can be beautiful, it's beautiful. And it's very, very easy. Low maintenance, stainless steel, really well made, timber and screenings, and it's just a really, really, really good looking thing, and that with some vegetation around it to screen it would make a huge difference. But it's where it goes. But I've got photos of that we can show you. But
Your Worship, I think it's a very good location. People are always hunting for the toilets, and that location is a good location. And I think that there's absolutely no reason why it couldn't look attractive. And we need to get on with this. We've mucked around with this for so long.
The only trouble is I don't know where to start. Under the present circumstances, with the acute shortage of money, I don't think we can afford to move them at this stage. That's one thought. We have plumbing in there. I presume I went in there and they complied when I went in there, but I presume by non-compliance means that there's not a disabled toilet there, which I presume is what you're referring to when you said they were non-complying. But it appalls me that we're up for another 450,000. You're going out there with no services under there, I imagine. So, and when you look at the plan, if you're going to move it then, which I don't necessarily agree with, if you're going to move it, you're actually putting it like a chessboard in the one vacant space that you can see from up in the other side of the railway line. Why not put it, if you're going to occupy area that I had in mind for greening, why not put it over on the other side of the walkway next to the distillery, just nicely away from, but next to it, so that at least when you come down and you come down the cutting, you look through and you're not looking through and trying to see the river, and of course the Oscar if it's there, because you'll see a toilet. But if it's across there behind that wharf shed as it is now, it won't make any difference to the people coming off the platform, because I walked it last week, and it won't make any difference to the people coming down the cutting, because they won't be able to see past the distillery and anything anyway. They'll be looking straight through, past the tree and onto the river. And I think if you're going to put it anywhere, put it on that side, but don't put it out in the middle of that, which I thought could be a lovely greened area and garden and everything, and also, which is a blue and a sight straight through to the river. It intrigues me with this plan that there is everything that is being put up is limiting the view of the river. And to me, the river is the most important thing, with of course the boat on it. But you think about that thing that was going to be put up, that was going to block the view from the railway station. This is going to block the view from there, the only gap that you've got there. And so I'm just critical and trying to be constructive as well, that move at the other side of the walkway. But also, I go back to the fact that we need to, we are seriously short of money on this. I think the whole thing is far more serious than probably most of us realise if you drill down into it. So why on earth don't we just, we've got the money, spend the money without mucking around with anything else on repairing the wharf and repairing the signal point, which all could have been done in the last 2 years, and I don't know why it hasn't been done. Get on with it and do that. And I think you'll find at the end of that there'll be no money for anything else anyway. So let's just work within ourselves. And I'm not really prepared to back the spending extra money here when we have people at extreme risk trying to cross the road in Middleton and unfunded road crossings. Unfunded at the moment. And I went through there the other day and I saw a mother with 3 or 4 kids and a dog and a pram, and I didn't even wait to see. I couldn't stop because there was nowhere to go, how she was going to get across the road. So I'm afraid I'm not prepared to go and put money into fluffy stuff down here that's going to run up our debt when those things are unfunded over in Middleton. I'm sorry.
We're almost used up our time. Is anybody, any else? We've only talked about the toilets. There's 12 items in here. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we're burning daylight on this, and to quote John Wayne, and it's an obvious place for the toilets. That's the only view I've got on the toilets. I'd actually, we have to renew those toilets. It's part of a renewal program for the wharf shed. So most of it's renewal. Where we put it, I think it makes sense to put it out where it is, and they can be made to look attractive. What I'd like to talk about is the order of the, and I don't mind if the motions get moved all together or separately. I really don't have a view, and I'll speak to the item when we go back into meeting procedures. But I'd actually just like Council to consider swapping recommendation 6 and recommendation 11, just the order of that we consider them in, because I think we need to acknowledge that recommendation talks about the next steps for this precinct if we endorse this stage, and I think it's but up in recommendation 6 we're talking about options to reduce debt across the council-wide, whereas I think really recommendation 11 should be up first and then recommendation 6 be the last one. That's just my view. I don't mind either way, but that's the only comment I've got to make.
Once we get into the meeting procedure properly. Councillor Coomans.
Yeah, the one I want to talk about is recommendation 3, which at the moment has the tenancy at the north end and the Oscar W at the south end. I think that's totally wrong. In my view, the Oscar W should be at the northern end. And I guess where I'm coming from is when you enter that area, whether it be from the cutting or from the railway or from the parking areas, the first thing you see at the moment is the end of that shed, and just crowd of that shed, you see the Oscar W. And to me, the jewel in the crown of this whole thing is the Oscar W. Not a tenancy for a commercial enterprise, but for a boat that has got so much historical value and is such an attraction for people to come down here. And even if they fall over the place, if they see that boat, that's what they want to see. And you know, some issues have been raised in terms of when they load it with timber. I understand it only happens at the moment only on a morning. It takes a few hours, and for the rest of the time, it's available. The whole of the wharf is available. I'd also like us to have a look at the actual area that each of those tenancy requires. I think the Oscar W does require a little bit more, and it probably needs an extra berth, an extra bay out of that shed. And so I want to see the tenancy at the moment, the commercial enterprise at the southern end, and I'd like to see the Oscar W with its displays, with all of the things that it can present to our tourists and our locals at the northern end. If we do agree with that, it probably just needs number 2, where we talk about glazing to the southwest wall. There needs to be some modifications so that that no longer happens there, because the tends to be at the other end. So that's my view. I think all of the petitions that we've had, the communications, the emails, the presentations have all said they want to retain the northern end of that shed, and I think they're right.
So that we've gone past the time we allocated now, so we'll now go back into proper meeting procedure, formal meeting procedure. Well, if you want to be here, if we've talked about the toilet really. If you could be here till midnight, if you do 12 of them. Pardon? I mean, you're going to discuss them as we go through them. We're not going to just bump them through without speaking about them.
Now, I do find a lot of benefit from the ability for us to freely speak about these issues, and I do find this to be an extremely material matter that we really need to discuss the whole way through. And if that ends up in us understanding, respecting other opinions, I think that'd be fantastic. Personally, I've got all night.
So I'll put it to the vote. Do you want to continue in adjourn and go to an informal discussion for longer? In favour of that? No, stop there. No, we'll just go back into meeting procedure. There's plenty of time to talk about each one as we go through if we need to. We've had goodness knows how many workshops on this. So we go to recommendation .1, which is the plans, and it's that one as amended, which is on the screen before you. So the location to be determined in the future. So is there a mover for that? Councillor Oliver. Seconder, Councillor Thornton. Is there any discussion other than what we've already had? Councillor Scott.
It says here in 1, external to the wharf shed as indicated in the below diagram. You just stated that a site to be disclosed later.
Hang on, just a moment, just read the screen. It's been taken out. External to the wharf shed with the location to be determined at a future meeting. It's not determined, it does no determination of where it's going, it's just saying it's not going to be in the wharf shed. So,
look, I apologise, I was looking at my screen. I can't look at 2 screens at once, so I retract what I said, thank you.
So is there any discussion further on that one? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we need to tighten this if we're going to go down this path and say at the February council meeting. We have to deal with this now. Thank you.
Got the mover and the seconder happy to make it the February? Yep, so we'll put that in there. We need to get on with it. So any further discussion on that?
Sorry, Worship, just a question of clarification.
Yeah.
So long as that doesn't delay this project and put at risk funding, external funding. I'm assuming that's not going to put at risk the external funding.
That won't worry. We need to talk about it and get on with it. It's one of the first things we need to do is the toilets. So any further discussion? I'll put that to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. So item 2 is that it goes on about option D, be updated to include. There's a recommendation there. And is a question? Yeah.
Question, if we were to consider recommendation 3 to reverse the occupancy of that shed, what effect will it have on 2? I think the glazing is an issue then, isn't it? The location of it?
Through the Chair, the decision to swap over the north and south shed was made in March last year. So since that time we've been working towards a plan which has the Oscar W on the south side and a commercial tenant on the north side. If you were to do a rescission motion of those March resolutions, then you would need to redesign the shed. So I also have a concern about delivery of Wharf shed as defined in option B, because that's been defined for the switch as well. I think we're starting to make decisions on the fly again and foreshadowing stuff that was decided 12 months ago.
Well, the point is, a decision made 12 months ago doesn't require a rescission motion because it was a different council. Isn't that right?
Through the Chair, this is the instruction that administration has been operating in since we were given that instruction. We keep going along those lines. We don't stop going along those lines until we're told to deviate somewhere else, and we certainly don't stop working at the elections. We just keep on going as instructed previously.
The question is, when you look at this shed at the moment, the layouts for the 2 occupancies are very similar. The work proposed is to line the whole of the shed, so to flip the 2 tenancies. The work that you were proposing for one end now happens at the other end. I can't see there's a great difficulty there.
Through the Chair, what the plan defines at the moment is enclosing the south side, the Oscar W side, whereas it was providing an outdoor area for the north side for a commercial tenancy, again to have out of the wind outdoor dining side of things. So it's not an exact flip, it will be a redesign of what is defined for the shed, which is all possible, but if we're making a decision of what we're going to be doing with the shed externally, we need to get on and make those decisions now.
Correct, and we need to make a decision because we've got some grant funding that has got some strict timelines. So I would suggest we can make that decision tonight to flip the tenancies and move on.
You can't move a rescission motion from the floor. So a rescission motion has to go into the agenda. So to change any decision of council with a rescission motion, it must be put up as a notice of motion and must go into the agenda. It can't be done from the floor.
Well, a question I asked before was, is it in fact a rescission motion? Because 12 months ago it was a different council, and it requires a rescission motion if a particular council makes that decision, but in this case it's a different council.
As far as I know, you can remember, and I don't have the meeting regulations in front of me, but once you've made a decision of council and council has commenced action on that decision, it's happening. So should council have spent money on any of this, a rescission motion is absolutely not possible. So if there's been no expenditure on it, then a rescission motion would be possible as far as I'm aware. But we need 5 clear days notices and it must go in the agenda. It's quite clear in the regulations. Councillor Nicholson, do you want to move it or anything, or? We need a mover and a seconder first. Is that microphone working? Or what are we doing here? As Nigel was saying, we're at the stage where we really need to do some more negotiation on this contract and get some things happening. And so we need to have some direction of where we're going, unfortunately. Yeah. So we really need to have we can ask questions, but we really need to move a question. Yeah.
So, Your Worship, we're looking at 2. I'll move it.
I'll second.
So do we have a seconder? Taunton? So now we move a seconder. Do we have any discussion on that? Councillor Nicholson.
As we all know, Alexandrina Council has won several grants to the tune of $5 million to complete the projects at the Wharf. We now are faced with a set of milestone achievements that we need to meet in order to keep that $5 million. We have a number of council assets, including the Wharf Shed and Signal Point Gallery, that need repair quite desperately and urgently. This evening, as a new council following the November elections, we're faced with a set of decisions about the future of the project that are very difficult. I, for one, would support any possible avenues for flipping the Oscar W and the commercial tenancy within Wharf Shed, but from discussions today, from reading through the report numerous times, and from the points raised in the chamber this evening, I'm beginning to see that we're left with no options to flip the tenancies in the shed, and I believe we are looking at having to make the decisions based on the resolutions of the previous council.
Nigel's saying there are options. It's just going to take some time, some more work on their behalf. Yep.
Any more options would put us in jeopardy of not meeting the milestones and keeping the $5 million in grant funding. Is that correct?
Through the chair, we're at the pointy edge of the wedge. We need to make decisions. I need to sit there and negotiate a contract to do the project which needs to be completed March next year. I fear that if we're going to start talking about flipping it over, we're going to go back on a decision that was made 12 months ago and what we're working towards over the last 12 months. I think that that decision probably should have been made quite some time ago if it was going to be made. I also fear that if you were to flip it, and we're just going to be back in the same boat, that you're going to get other parties coming in and saying the reasons why it shouldn't be flipped. I think that all 12 decisions that we have before us today, we're not going to make everyone happy. I'm hoping that what the officer's recommendation does is a compromise to try and achieve a balancing act where, unfortunately, I don't think everyone's excited and not everyone's happy, but it's a decision that people can then work out where we're at, what we need to do, and what needs to be next, and that's what before you. So I just wanted to clarify that there is an ability. I don't want to say there's no ability in the whole wide world to flip it, but it does take time. It does have flow-on effects. Is just what I was trying to clarify there.
Councillor Miller.
Your Worship, I move a formal motion that this be put and we vote now and stop discussing it. Thank you.
That's a formal motion that it be put. Is there a seconder for the formal motion? Councillor Maidment. So it's a formal motion that we put. So the first process of this is we put the motion that it be put. So we're not talking about the motion, we're talking about that it be put. So for clarification, so all those in favour? So 5, so that's lost. 5, isn't it? Sorry, again, 1, 2, 3. No, 6. No, it's carried. Sorry, apologise. Yeah, no, it's carried. So, Councillor Oliver, if you want to speak, can you let me know you want to speak, and I'll come to you, and then we'll do it right. So now we're going to put the motion, so we're talking about item 2 of the dot points, but we're going to put that as it is to you. So all those in favour? That's against? That's carried.
Mayor Page, could I ask for a division on this one, please? I think $14 million deserves a division.
Councillor Coomans is calling a division. I just remind elected members that a division is a new vote, and I ask all those voting in the affirmative to please stand. So we have Councillor Oliver, Councillor Thornton, Councillor Miller, Councillor Livingston, Councillor Maidment, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Gardner. Thank you. Would those voting in the negative please stand? Councillor Scott and Councillor Coomans. So it is carried. Thank you for that. You can ask a question, yes. What about?
I'm just a little intrigued that we looks like we're putting glazing. We've doubled up on the glazing.
No, sorry, Councillor Scott. No, we've done that item. Thank you. Moving on to item part 3, which is the next one, which has the plan of the building on it. So there's a recommendation there. We do that one. Is there a mover for that? Move Councillor Thornton.
Can I have alternative recommendation
right,
for this one?
Yep.
I think Tanya has something she can bring up in terms of this, but I propose that we increase the commercial tenancy by 1 bay. If we all put our business hats on for a while, it'll be a great benefit to the council to have more space for commercial tenancy. It could potentially lower our costs by around 30 grand in terms of the fit out for Oscar W. And I just think it's beneficial to the council and the community to have some more commercial tenancy options down there. And yeah, I think that the layout that it is at now is great. We walked down that way with the boat on the southern end. You can see it as soon as you get off the train. And it's, yeah, I'd like people to consider that.
So do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Gardner?
Speak to it, Your Worship.
Yep.
I too agree that we need to increase the commercial tenancy section by 1 bay. At the present time, the Wharf barrel shed is open every day. Locals love it. They come and meet friends. Workers come after work and meet for a drink before heading home. Visitors come from all over and love the ambience of the shed where it is. They love the history. They love the welcome. And young people come on weekends and there's music and song and there's the river in all its beauty. And this activates the wharf in a way that it has never been activated since I've been in Goolwa, and I've been here nearly 30 years. It's an absolute necessity. The Oscar W volunteers have unfortunately over a period of time and more recently have lost a lot of volunteers, and as a result of the Oscars accident last week, the captain, I believe, has decided not to continue to drive the boat or steer the boat or whatever it is that they do. The volunteers take the Oscar W out 1 weekend a month, and there are other occasions, of course, that it does steam, but it's a very old boat that needs ongoing maintenance, a lot of ongoing maintenance. And the volunteers take care of this giant task, and without their continued efforts, frankly, the boat would not be steaming at all. However, for the majority of each month, Oscar W is a historic static display. The plans for which the volunteers dream of have not materialised yet. But if more volunteers are found and the dreams become a reality, they may need more room, and council can then, at that time, apply for a grant to build the shed envisaged originally. To me, it's an elegant solution. The space volunteers want as the Riverboat Centre Museum is at present a static exhibition. I have no idea what they have in mind. They haven't actually talked about it. Children these days want more. They're devotees of digital wonders. They love QR codes. They want to press, move, talk to. They want flashing lights and moving bits. This is the world of children in the 21st century. And you know where they'll find that? They will find it in the Signal Point Experience Centre. They will find it in the Signal Point Experience Centre, and I've been part of that working party since it began. This is going to be an extremely interesting and fascinating place for children, for families, for grandparents, for anyone who loves to want to hear about the history of the river, the Ngadjuri culture and the river boats and the river trade. It's here that the children will learn and have an enormous amount of fun. It will be an ongoing exhibition, so it may begin with the Ngadjuri and go on to the river boats, and then the riverboat captains. The ideas for this centre are endless. And then once the children and their parents have been in there, they'll go out of Signal Point and they'll see the Oscar W, and if it's steaming, jump aboard for a magical ride on the river. I think that this alteration, having 6 bays, is going to be really important for the commercial enterprise that we already have on the wharf. The wharf barrel shed's been trading for the past 8 years, and they recently agreed to accept 5 bays, not because that's all they need, but they didn't really want to upset Oscar W volunteers. Is this what we want? Do we as a council want to be held to ransom? We need to make a decision without fear or favour. The Wharf Barrel Sheds supported the Oscar W both financially and by promoting it to their patrons. They've managed with the present space configuration, but they really want the space to prepare food, and they don't have a kitchen. If they have a kitchen, then they'll be able to provide food for example, families who've been on the train or who've been for a ride on Oscar W and desperately want takeaway food for lunch to eat on the lawns and yet still be on the wharf. What happens if the present business decides to leave and the commercial space is only 5 bays and doesn't have enough space for a decent kitchen? It's going to lease this area. Because you see, the commercial businesses on the wharf are the ones that bring many, many people down to the wharf where they can see the history of the Oscar W.
We're at our 5 minutes, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. As elected members, we have a duty to actively and honestly make decisions without fear or favour and in the best interest of our communities. And I think we should be having bays 6 for for the commercial enterprise.
Councillor Maidment.
I fully support this change. This project is 10 years in the making. It was the council of 2018, which is not the previous council that I was a member, that applied for the grant funding and which provided council contribution, and this project had implications for 2018-19 budget, the long-term financial plan 17 to 26, and the infrastructure and asset management plan 16-25. That was over the last 4 years. That's what we've had to deal with, and to first agree to option B, which looked very pretty and very nice and gave us all the options with a few minor adjustments. We had to backpedal on that because the blowout in costs from 7.5 million to 10.2, which would only just cover basically what we're attempting to do now. And of course, since we've uncovered the faults in the seawall, the shed itself, it's now gone out quite considerably. And you're expecting the North Ward ratepayers to accept the burden of debt for the next 10 years. That's if we increase to option D, the 14.55 million. Yet you've taken away 5 million allocated for a new recreational precinct for Strathalbyn. So I've got to sell this to my North Ward ratepayers, and it's a hard sell. And we do need to move on. And so I'm quite prepared to vote this in, that the 6 bays be allocated to the tenancy. You heard Bronwyn Lewis talk about commercial opportunities and getting value for money, and I think the only way we're going to get value for money, because Oscar W is running at a loss, and I would hate to see what that figure is coming in this year. It's just unfortunate with an accident and COVID and a few other things, but we're propping it up financially. We're not propping up the tenancy, and they will provide a lot of the fit out for their particular space.
Councillor Nicholson.
Accept the inevitability of the move of the Oscar W shed to the southern side of the but I do not support further gouging of the riverboat centre. The current shed allocation, as demonstrated in the report, is sufficient. It's a good compromise. The Oscar W retains a similar space. The commercial space gains space, as well as the outdoor area. Moving toilets out of the shed gives that opportunity. I think it's a fair compromise. The northern side, where the commercial tenant opportunity is, also gains the exposure, which is significant. The Oscar W cannot stand further gouging. I've got children in the area, aged 3, 6 and 7. Yes, lights and moving parts are interesting to them. They get that everywhere, and it only holds their attention for so long. As a parent, I am interested in experiences for my children with natural textures, history, things that really stoke their imaginations, where they can learn, where they be fully immersed, and I do not want to see any more compromise of the Riverboat Centre or the Oscar W volunteers. Do not support this proposal.
Any further discussion? Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Mayor Parks. Look, I'm in no doubt that the key to this plan is a long-term asset that this council owns and wants to see benefiting everyone, and that is the Oscar W. If this is not the goal, then why not sell it to the highest bidder and assist with our significant loan borrowings, and then let it survive on a commercial basis? But no, the matter of sale has not been entered into any of our discussions. Associated with this is the fact that, except for some administrative costs, the whole venture of showcasing the asset and providing the joy of a sail on the Goolwa Lakes is done by a bunch of dedicated volunteers who are passionate about its survival and everything else to do with it. This is demonstrated by the way in which they've voiced their opinions about the issue and arranging petitions, some 1,500 signatories to the two, and making regular presentations to council. So then, what is the best package that is the Oscar W? Firstly, it has to be located in a position that is visible as possible to all and sundry, so it will indeed be a feature and attract their attention. When you look at people entering the Wharf area, they appear to be coming from the new proposed car park, from the town and from the Hindmarsh Island Bridge area. Visibility from the train when it is parked in the station is limited because firstly, the train is in between the station platform and the water, and secondly, the distillery and the main shed do obstruct the view. However, at a pedestrian crossing, visibility of the Oscar W at its present location is best, even if at first you can only see half of it. So to me, the best berthing location for the Oscar W is on the northern or bridge end of the shed. However, there is an issue of access when the Oscar W is being replenished with timber via conveyor, and I understand this is essentially on a weekday morning for a few hours. So the timing of this loading, although interesting to watch, will be important so that access to the area is not impeded. My conclusions of this is therefore is that the Oscar W needs to be in the most visible location at the Wharf, which I think is the northern end. This means that in relation to the two tenancies, the Oscar W volunteers should be located at the northern end. Their space should not be reduced in any way, and their commercial activity at the southern end. That's my view.
Councillor Scott and Councillor Oliver.
In the beginning, as I understand it, and I wasn't in council, the original plan for that wharf shed was for the Oscar W. There was no retail, no commercial tenancy there. Am I right, Your Worship? I feel very sorry for the Oscar W people. I've been an advocate for volunteers for probably 30 odd years, and I know what it's like. They are extremely dedicated, and they have an asset that they obviously love, and I think we love it too. And they're being tossed around like a blown up tube on a high sea. They're here 1 minute, there, no, we're going to... The promotion of this whole thing when I came into council was that this place was almost unique in the world. Almost. There's one other place where the train meets the boat. The Wharf, what is our core business at the Wharf? That's what I'm asking. What is our core business? I suggest at a wharf, it's a maritime related activity. And yet to me, it's been pushed around, it could be here, oh, we don't do that. They've said they want a maximum amount of room. They have been talking about a riverboat centre for ages and ages and ages. And they've been, oh, well, they only meet once a month, they only do this, they only do that. They're trying to make their way. The more we cut the incentive away from them, the more they'll shrink, and you'll finish up, the boat will be tied up there full time with no one running it. These people have got to have some sort of incentive, for goodness sake. And when you think about it, I mean, Goolwa's an old river town. It's not a drinks town. Someone said to me over at Malang, that dreadful hot day on Saturday, you can whip up the street and get a drink or buy your beads and jewellery and stuff, but you can't get up the street to the paddle steamer. It's got to be down at the wharf. And I think we're just missing the boat here completely. You know, we're worrying about a commercial tenancy. There's a beautiful slot up on the hill that commercial tenancy has used with great success and could be in there tomorrow. And the Oscar W could have the whole of that shed to do what it could be given 10 years or 5 years. And say, if you don't develop that riverboat centre, bear in mind they're volunteers, they're not on a fat salary, they will get it together. They've salvaged some of the stuff that was apparently thrown out of the original signal point and have got it stored away, so I've been told. And they can we could give them that sort of incentive, and then they could look around and say, gee whiz, come on, we can do something. Look at what's happened at Morgan. The Morgan people have raised a sunken barge that was originally a paddle boat, turned it back into a paddle boat, and it's now almost an operational boat. Unfortunately, it had a fire on it not so long ago and had to go down to be refurbished again. They just got it up to go. The Canala or some name like that, you can see it up there. It's actually at Morgan at Manham at the moment, being repaired. But that's what those people can do. What volunteers can do is absolutely, it's limitless. If we get something like the council supporting them. Look at we went to a thing the other day, some of us did, excellent introduction to the Wooden Boat Festival. What was the centre point of that? The Oscar W, that lovely film about the Oscar W. And I just think it's very sad that we're getting all bound up about a commercial tenancy. No one seems to worry that the Fleurieu pool is losing $700,000 a year. No one seems to worry about that, but they're wanting to worry about a commercial tenancy here at the expense of our riverboat people. We are a riverboat centre. We're the only inland port in Australia, whatever, from the naval point of view. We've got so much, we could develop that into all sorts of things. Who knows? But no, we want to cut them back. No, just they only meet once a month, and yeah, they're only volunteers, you know, it's all that sort of stuff. I've lived through it all my life, so I know. I'm speaking from experience. And I think that if I had my way, they'd have the whole building and the others be up in building 1, because that's a lovely building and it was lovely when they were there, so they're not missing out on a thing. And they're overlooking the wharf. They can have a deck extended like it was supposed to be magnificent there in summer's evenings, accessible the whole bit. So I'm afraid I think we've got our mix wrong. So I'd be giving them the whole lot. That's what I'd be doing, but so easy. We wouldn't have to pay so much for the fit out. I know there's some complication that in the grant that there are supposed to be 2 kitchens and all that. It's an exercise in not ever to do this again. There needs to be a lot more planning before we go and get money from the government to do these things. Someone dreaming up an idea, go and get some money, and then we have to make it fit 2 or 3 councils later. There's a great lesson to be learned.
Councillor Oliver, you were next.
Better. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just stepping up a bit, you know, I have a grand vision for the wharf, and I think we should, in the long term, be looking to make it into the greatest paddle steamer wharf in the world. We are today, however, constrained by money, constrained by time, constrained by conditions of grants and practicality, and we need to get on the move. Today, I would like to fix the wharf, fix the structural problems. I would like to, I'm being aware for the community of the cost and the increased cost, mine isn't working either. The increased cost, I would like to minimise the scope and the additional expense as much as possible back to fixing the wharf, i.e. no plan B at this time. I would like the outcome to be fair and equitable for all the stakeholders. And I would like to say that I support both the tenancies. I think the Wharf Barrel Shed has done a tremendous job and it is an icon, and so is the Oscar W. I can't help think though that the way things are the way they are, and that if we can't agree on a position to prefer one for one aspect and one for the other, then I think that we should perhaps consider forming 2 equal tenancies, which I believe that the layout design presented to us originally here does, unless one party is prepared to negotiate or move on. But it seems from the roundtable discussions that's not going to happen. I also think that if we can't agree, so as we're not producing winners, people are where they are, and then perhaps they should stay where they are. And by doing this, we'll create 2 equal tenancies which can both be commercial or both be whatever in the future, and they'll be equal and they'll be flexible for the future in 30 years' time. And I do think that we do need to not think about Plan B. I think that I would like to see point 11 of the recommendation deleted and considered at some time in the future when we're in the position. I'd also like to see, as part of the business plan process, that we look for all savings on all other projects and all other CapEx to offset this additional cost. Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't see this changing of the space as diminishing at all the contribution, the valuable contribution of the volunteers, and I really hope they don't see it that way. But there are commercial realities here, and I just want to, in recognition of that, foreshadow that after we've made a decision on this point, I'd like to see recommendation 9 dealt with next. Thank you.
Is any... Oh, Councillor Livingston.
Question. Is there any risk of our grant funding, well, are we at risk of losing the grant funding if the internal allocation decision is deferred to the February meeting?
Through the Chair, the key things today was to ensure that we got on and had that early contract to do signal point roof, and also order the wood, and also move towards fixing the shed. The internals probably could, well, the internals could wait to the February decision, yes. It would not jeopardise our grant funding by resolving the internals at February.
And, sorry, assistance by moving a formal motion that occur?
You could move a formal motion, yes.
Yes, I'd like to.
So you're moving a formal motion that we adjourn this item till the February meeting?
Yes.
Right. So is there a seconder for that? Councillor Oliver. So it's got to be somebody that hasn't spoken. We've got one second. Oh, the second, yeah, the second. Sorry, Hannah. So the seconder is Councillor Gardner. You could second the formal motion, apparently? No? Hannah? Oh, right. So, sorry, Councillor Oliver, you can correct me. So, it's a formal motion that we adjourn this particular dot point 3 till the February meeting. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against? It's carried. So we can now move on to, well, just before we do, I'll just clarify a couple of things. The Oscar bumped the bridge. It's one of those things that happen. The skipper hasn't resigned, but obviously was shaken up, as you would be, and was concerned, I'm sure, concerned about whether he should continue to do so, and he's considering it, but he hasn't quit. And I think once he sort of settles down and gets over the shock, nobody was hurt, the boat was not severely damaged, the bridge, apart from a scratch, the bridge is fine, didn't even move it, and it only glanced off it. So there's no problems there with volunteers. You know, I think when we're thinking about this, we have to remember that in the original plans, Oscar had the shed. Council encouraged a commercial operator to submit an offer to lease part of that shed, and they did it, and they've done very well. And so you have that situation where now we've got the Oscar W who won the whole shed. They used to have it. You've got a commercial tenant that's very successful in the shed. So you can't, you've got to recognise that somebody makes a commercial investment in this council. We can't just tick them off when we feel like it. We've got to recognise what they've done. So just think about that when you're getting ready for the February meeting. It's important that we recognise that and their commitment as well as Oscar's commitment, which is outstanding. And I love the Oscar W. I also enjoy going to the Barrel's Head for a beer. So, question, yeah.
Do you think the captain may make a decision based on the outcome of decision of this council in relation to the Wharf?
I don't know. I haven't spoken to him, but I would doubt it. I would think his decision would be made on whether he thinks he's capable. Reassure himself that he's still got the capability. He's a good skipper. He wants to reassure himself that he's still good doing it. So if I move on to Councillor Livingston.
Question, just because obviously the Murray is experiencing a very significant event at the moment. Perhaps what happened with the Oscar W has something to do with that, and perhaps that could be acknowledged.
It's a combination of lots of things. That's what we're here to discuss tonight, but the vessel was travelling downstream, was travelling downstream in a current which meant that the rudder basically virtually had no effect. So he did line it up for the bridge, and then the wind got them, and so they were ready to hit reverse and stop it, but to hit reverse would have been worse than glancing off it like they did. So they did the right thing. They glanced off it. The boat damage is minimal in reality, and the part of the boat that bumped the bridge and bent is designed to do that. It's designed to deflect the boat. So we move back now to what we're doing, which is dot point 4. Sorry? So we do 4 and 5 together. Nigel says we should do them together if you're okay with that. So we might move on because it's getting late. Councillor Gardner, you wish to move that?
Yes, Your Worship.
We have a seconder. Councillor Thornton. Any discussion? No. Councillor Miller.
Sorry. Thank you, Worship. Okay. Sorry, I'll set the timer because I do intend to speak for quite some time. Thank you. We're dealing with 4 and 5, is that correct? I've focused on value management, risk management, asset management and the wider needs of council. The internal allocation of space for the tenancies of the Wharf shed and where the Oscar docks I think are secondary matters. The real hero is the Wharf itself. Without a safe and well-maintained Wharf, any other decisions can't be made and are akin to moving the deck chairs. This decision is about preserving the Wharf and Wharf shed roof, asset renewal and maintenance, retaining existing service levels and meeting committed project funding milestones. The Wharf is not just an Alexandrina Council asset, it is used by a much broader population than those who reside in Alexandrina. That is why we must not put at risk funding from state government or federal government towards the maintenance and renewal of an ageing and deteriorating Wharf. Both credentials advise that without state and federal funding, Alexandrina is unlikely to be able to deliver this project in its own right without exceeding our financial indicators or by significantly reducing the scope of the project. With the external $5 million funding, we are sailing very close to the wind. Without it, I believe we won't just teeter on the edge of a fiscal cliff, we'll fall over it. I acknowledge the value management work that has been done by the CEO, staff and contractor on this Wharf project. The officer report advises we are within tolerance of the KPIs that tell us and our community if our decisions are sustainable. That is, our operating surplus ratio, our net financial liabilities ratio and our asset renewal funding ratio. But the reality is we do not have much room to move. I don't think we've had some for some time. I could not see any reference in the revised financials document updating the net present value, benefits to cost ratio or internal rate of return percentage for this project. The financial risk assessment in the updated prudential is brutal in its assessment of our net financial liabilities ratio, yet we press on. I'd like to have understood better the option of doing nothing. I note the commentary as to the accuracy and completeness of Council's current long-term financial plan. I note the commentary on the remaining high level of residual risk and that the contingency will not likely be sufficient. I note the commentary on the whole of life costs as they relate to handling of depreciation in our long-term financial plan, an infrastructure asset management plan and impact on operating surplus. I am not going to read out what's written on page 8 of the updated prudential report, that will be in the minutes, and the conclusion on page 9, but it makes clear there will be opportunity costs in making this decision. Saying yes to this, in effect, is saying no to future-worthy capital projects throughout our entire council area for some time. I hope one of the deliverables from this project is a detailed asset management plan specifically for the Wharf so future councils are not caught out like this. The communication strategy going forward will be critical, so I hope there is one. There are many who will balk at what has morphed into a $9.5 million project for council. I note that the net impact of this decision is increased borrowings of $3.47 million, but that is only if you make all the adjustments flagged in the report. The option to debate those adjustments tonight will only further compress the fast approaching external funding milestones. I hope Mayor Parkes will be well supported by all of us in the administration in responding to the scrutiny that is going to come with this decision, because it is in the chamber where the decision gets made, not the Mayor, but he's the person who now has to sell it and defend it. I'd like to know if a media release is planned. We really don't have much choice, do we, but to support this. It's a fact that we are starting our term with a decision that is going to launch this council into new territory and see us in the unenviable position of being one of the most leveraged councils in South Australia, with borrowings of $58 million. Interest is in the order of $500,000 per annum. I would very much like to be corrected on that number and hope history proves I'm wrong. I don't have an issue with responsible use of debt. That, in the general local government world for a council of our size, is, I understand it to be around 10 million. But even 10 million of borrowings requires close monitoring of the three key performance indicators I referred to earlier. We are well in excess of that 10 million benchmark. Whilst both Prudentials comment that the project is not intended to produce revenue, we must turn our minds to how future plans for this precinct can do just that. At the 28th of November council meeting, I asked questions regarding asset management, and at the same meeting I moved, and council supported unanimously, the development of a revenue strategy. The conclusion of the updated Prudential references the need for a detailed plan to repay borrowings to create additional future capacity and reduce the future interest burden on ratepayers. This revenue focus is now critical because we need a clear pathway forward to get out of the highly leveraged position we're about to commit to. The Goolwa Wharf precinct is ripe for innovative public-private partnership investment and revenue-raising opportunities that are sympathetic to preserving our history. And it is important to preserve our history. But questions I have for every signatory to petitions and those who made deputations on the space allocation in the wharf shed and the position of the paddle steamer are: how much are you willing to pay to maintain the status quo? How much do you expect every other ratepayer to pay? Preserving historical assets and experiences does not come without a cost. Out of necessity, I give my qualified support to plans 1 to 5 in option D, which, as I understand, are now critical in terms of engineering, maintenance and risk management and external funding. Future stages that go beyond risk and asset management, be it acquisition or renewal, must only be considered in the context of the broader needs of our council and be subject to the rigour of annual business plan and budget processes and discussions. To that end, I will fall in behind whatever the majority decision of this chamber is, but in all likelihood I'll be voting in the negative, if only so the decision is not unanimous. I just can't bring myself to vote for $58 million in debt and all that implies. And I would very much like to see recommendations 11 and 6 swapped around. The precinct master plan scope belt should be tightened before you ask the rest of the community to what in effect is to be penalised. And in closing, I'm foreshadowing 2 additional motions as important elements in moving forward in a positive way. The first is that Council, for the purpose of ensuring awareness of this significant project, write to the following state and federal members of Parliament and organisations and include in the letter an extract of the minutes and request their advocacy for support, in kind or financial, for this project. And it's the Premier, the federal member for Mayo, the member for Finnis, the member for Hammond, the member for Hyson, Council Southern Hills Local Government Association, member councils and Regional Development Australia. The second motion that I'm foreshadowing, which I don't need to be dealt with now, is that council members within 7 days be provided with a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding between council and the Friends of the PS Oscar W. As part of considerations for the 23-24 annual business plan and budget, an analysis of the governance, financials and risk management practices of the Friends of the PS Oscar W be undertaken as a priority, and council members be provided with a copy of the PS Oscar W conservation plan and business plan. And I do not want this taken to be disrespecting the incredible value that the Oscar PW volunteers bring. I haven't been part of previous negotiations with them, and I think I went on the cruise, the Twilight Cruise, and it was amazing. But the cold hard facts are we have huge debt that I am not comfortable with, but unfortunately I have to live with, and I have to defend it to my community. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on 4 and 5? Put the motion. All those in favour? In favour? Against? That's carried.
I think $14 million requires a division, Mayor Parkes, so I'd ask for that, please.
Pardon?
A division.
A division. So Councillor Coomans is calling a division. Just again remind elected members that a division is a new vote. So would those voting in the affirmative please stand? Councillor Oliver, Councillor Thornton, Councillor Livingston, Councillor Maidment, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Gardner. Thank you. With those voting in the negative please stand. Councillor Scott, Councillor Lewis and Councillor Goomans. It's carried. Thank you. Oh, it's Councillor Scott, Councillor Miller and Councillor Goomans. Sorry. So, it's been going that long, it's getting confused. So we go to item 6, which is 6. Do you want to keep going one by one, or do you want to start doing them together? One by one, so item 6, is there a mover for that? You can't request it, but you can move an amendment to it.
Yes, I'd like to add some words to that,
Yes.
if that's possible, please, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to additional options to reduce council's debt. I'd like to change that to additional options to reduce council's expenditure, operating expenditure, capital expenditure and debt. And with the word permanently in there, please. I'd like to change it so it reads permanently reduce council's operating expenditure, capital expenditure and debt.
Yep, so you're moving that?
Yes, please.
So do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Maidment? Any discussion on that? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't quite understand what that means. Permanently reduce?
So that it's not just a timing difference, not shuffling it from one year to the next. Actually, we look for ways to permanently reduce the operating cost structure.
That's right, Councillor Oliver.
Sorry.
Thank you, Worship. My question was to you. My question was to you, not to the. So I'm just seeking understanding what permanently reduce council's operating expenditure means. I'm not sure it adds anything to the motion.
Well, it's clear. It's saying quite clearly that you want the administration to reduce our operating expenses. You want to reduce capital expenditure into the future, and you want to reduce debt, which we all want to do. So it's pretty straightforward. It's quite clear. Councillor Gardner, did you wish to speak to it?
Yes, may I speak to it? Oh, I am willing to go along with this, providing it doesn't have the word permanently. I think that could be dangerous.
You're putting an imposition on a future council too, so you could put in there for the term of this council as an option.
I would be happy for the word permanently to be removed.
Okay, that's fine. It's been removed. So, Councillor Maidment, you happy with that? Yep. So, is there any further discussion? So I'll put the item. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. That's 6. Bloody messing this. So it's item 7. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Oliver. So a seconder. Councillor Livingston. Any discussion on that? 7. Councillor Maidment.
Would you like to elaborate on the further discussions that will occur on the methodology to reconstruct the wharf deck, please?
Well, this is exactly what it says. So what we would be doing is with the consultants and the contractors discussing the process they're going to undertake on the wharf remediation. Exactly that. So not just say, go and do that. It's giving Nigel and myself the opportunity to engage in discussion with them and drill down into exactly what they're going to do and try and come up with them in a solution that saves us money and gets it done. So, any further discussions? Councillor Scott, yeah.
Is it right that we only have one one quote on all this work?
That's correct. Yep. Nigel, do you want to answer? Yep.
Through the chair, we went through a procurement process to get the head contractor to come in, and what the head contractor did when they come in, they dive under the water, they do pressure testing, they investigate it to such a level that when they do a final quote, that the final quote is done with science behind it, so it's not just a figure that they've come up with. However, council's under no obligation to accept that final quote. Should that final quote not be acceptable to council, we would go out for further discussions. So it's a difficult process to get 3 different places to give you that level of detail of a final quote without each putting down a set of divers, each doing their pressure testing and so on, and that's why the process is being broken into 2 processes that essentially have already gone out for 3 quotes to get to that process already.
Any further discussion? Put that item 7 to you. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. It's carried. So we go to item 8, and there's a remover for item 8. Councillor Oliver. Is there a seconder? Councillor Gardner. Any discussion, questions? Councillor Scott.
Why are we replacing all the timber on the wharf when it's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick, and in general it's in quite good order?
So I don't think the intention is to replace all the timber on all of the wharf. There's the section that's being replaced, which is having the timber replaced, and the timber on that section's had it. It's 45 mil thick, and hardwood, split, rotten, falling apart where it's held down. It's dangerous. We had a TV camera down there from Channel 10 the other week, and he had to take the camera off the wharf and put it on the grass because he couldn't take couldn't record an interview without it vibrating all over the place when people were walking up and down. So you can see what needs to be done down there. It's got to be done. We're not replacing things we don't need to. Councillor Nicholson.
I'd just like to briefly touch on the importance of this point, as the price for the timber is only being held until tomorrow, January 17th. So this is very crucial.
It's true. I mean, the amount of timber in hardwood, seasoned hardwood, air seasoned, not kiln dried, is hard to get. Very, very hard to get. It's spotted gum, and it's the perfect timber for the job. And so we had to reserve that, otherwise if we wait, we would end up with, we could say wait another month and think about it, and by then that timber won't be there. Councillor Oliver.
Could I also just please note that
hang on, if you speak, you will close the discussion on this item because you moved it.
Right.
So is there anybody else wishes to speak? No, so go ahead.
I just wanted to note the advice of earlier today that the contracts will not just be negotiated and signed by the Mayor and the Chief Executive Officer, but will also be subject to our standard legal review. Thank you.
Any further discussion on item 8? I will put that to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 9 is there, straightforward. Move, Councillor Miller. Seconder, Councillor Maidment. No, sorry, Councillor Coomans. Get my names right, see. Any discussion relating to that? No, so I'll put that item 9 to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Move to item 10, which is the relocation of the barrel shed to the building by the Signal Point. Move, Councillor Oliver.
No, sorry, I have a question, if that's okay.
Question first, yeah.
This is dealing specifically with the commercial tenant. Could you please advise what the implications are to the other tenants and other stakeholders on the wharf, and what might be being done to help them out during this period?
Through the chair, the reason why we need to relocate the wharf barrel shed is that they're an existing tenant. The fact that we're going to be pulling the shed down to put it back up again means that they can't remain in in the building at the time. Therefore, we're proposing that they relocate to the signal point for the duration of when they are unable to occupy their current tenancy. We've been working with the Friends of Oscar W for where they will go during the period of time as well, and that will continue on. We've been working with the tenants of Hector's at the moment. We will be doing section south first to do down there. Hopefully we'll work out exactly what needs to be done. We'll do that first, move down to the other section, and therefore Hector's will be interrupted, but they can still occupy their building. I spent some time with the owners of Hector's, or tenants of Hector's on Friday, and we're talking about what we'll need to do to still get access. We may have to put a door in the side, different ways of doing deliveries, but we'll continue to work with that tenant throughout this whole process to minimise interruptions. There will be interruptions, but it's our work to minimise as well. Also been working with the distillery to make sure that all their deliveries can still occur, and methodology for that, and that's why we've broke it down into different stages to make sure that access does. I think the important thing is to keep that communication up, keep consulting with them, keep those discussions occurring to minimise the disruptions, and we'll be doing that throughout the whole process.
So item 10, is there a mover for Councillor?
Can we have confirmation that the Wharf barrel shed are agreeable to being relocated to Signal Point and the terms have been negotiated?
Yes, they're happy to go up there. They did it before when we did the previous wharf repair. It worked out all right for them. Yep. So, is there a mover for this? Councillor Nicholson. Seconder, Councillor Oliver. Any discussion on it? No, so I'll put that item 10 to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. We go to 11. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to propose that item 11 be deleted and not considered at this point in time. Again, the rationale being is that we were really at a stretch to afford option D. I think it's bad to send a message to the community and bad on our budget planning process if we were to say that we're going to hoik option B or uplift to option B in the next 3 to 4 months. I think that should wait until we've paid for this, we understand what we've achieved, and we look at it in the future as a separate business case.
So
thank you.
The way to handle that, the easiest way to handle that is say nothing and let it lapse through want of a mover or a seconder, and it just go. So is there anybody that wants to move it? No? Is there anybody? No, there's no one's collected. So that we'll let it lapse through want of a mover or a seconder. So that gets rid of item 11. Right, just a sec, yeah. So what we can... maybe there's a case of when it does come back, that's the time we don't consider it anymore. But that recommendation... Right, so... You can do it now or you can do it later?
Through the chair, my concerns at the moment by just deleting it doesn't mean that I stop looking at it, because what the motion has been previously is the fact that we're going to put in option D and look towards doing option B. So by deleting the motion now doesn't completely take it off the table. But you've also got motions earlier which says that I need to, in the budget consideration, look for reduction in expenditure, look for reduction in debt. So the logical thing to occur when I bring it back is that it's probably likely not to go ahead, but I haven't put that to council decision. The reason why I've worded it like this is because we actually haven't fully explored what option B is and what it's all about, and therefore this report concentrated on option D. But option B is still on the table. Just by deleting it out doesn't make it go away. But my recommendation is that you could modify it if you're wanting to send a message to the community, that it would say the consideration of option B planned for the Wharf be subject to discussions in the annual business plan, then put in brackets, but with the likely removal to occur at that time, or something along those lines.
Or you could move it and second it and let it vote.
It needs to be considered at some point. And
So the other option is to move it and second it and vote it down and vote. So I'm happy to go whichever you want to go.
You wish?
Perhaps we should vote it down.
Okay, so you'll be the mover? Is there a seconder? Councillor Miller?
Your Worship, I'll move this if we put the word not in front of that consideration of the option B plan for the Goolwa Wharf Revitalisation project not be subject to discussions.
So if you put not in there, that will defeat the purpose of voting it down, because then it will be back up. Because you said you've defeated not doing it, and you.
I'm happy to move whatever removes this from being discussed when we have the annual business plans discussions.
So it's me to move. So if you second it and then it doesn't get supported with the vote, it's gone. Okay. So
We're saying option B be subject to discussions in the draft 2023-24 annual business plan.
So if it's lost, it won't be considered.
Okay. So we vote against it.
Miller? Yeah. Is there any further discussion? So I'll put that to you. All those in favour? So it's lost. So item 12 is straightforward. Is there a mover for that? Is there a seconder? Item 12 we're up to. Councillor Scott. Is there any discussion? It's just bringing a report back to future council meetings.
Sorry, if I may, this does read pretty option that it's like, do we want them to have an extension or not at some time in the future? I agree with deferring it, but like I believe that the Wharf Barrel Shed would have an opportunity under their lease, and also a continuing expectation that their lease would be renewed.
So it's saying that the request for the extension of the lease be brought to council in a further report, which it has to do.
Yep.
No, it's not automatic.
No, I'm just concerned that it looks like it's up for grabs whether they're going to stay there or not.
They have
that reasonable expectation?
An extension to their lease, but it has to come back in a report to council.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any further discussion on that? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Now, Councillor Miller, you've got 2 foreshadowed motions. You've sort of spoken to them, but you might as well start with the first one first, moving it. Do you wish to speak to it again?
I think you wish it.
So is there a seconder for that one? Is that they on the screen? Seconder, Councillor Nicholson. Any discussion? No, so I'll put that to you. You all happy with that?
Just, if I may, I would like to make the point that the wharf is more than just for Goolwa, it's more than just for Alexandrina, so I think we should have a reasonable expectation. So if we ask these people for help, that they should give it reasonable consideration and help us if they can. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Scott. Councillor Miller, can you turn your microphone off, please? Councillor Scott.
Just a question. The 3 state politicians you have there are all in opposition. Would it be prudent to include the government's tourism minister in that circulation? I can't remember who it is, but
Councillor Miller, do you want to include the?
Yes, Your Worship. Any minister that can advocate on our behalf. Thank you.
Yep. So we'll include the tourism minister. All right. Any further discussion? Councillor Coogan.
Yeah, I was just going to say the electorate of Mawson is also part of Alexandrina, and it has a Labor member in there and a member of the government, so why not include him?
Check, we'll make sure that, let's get that right with the boundaries, electoral boundaries. So that, any further discussion? So put that to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. And we go to Councillor Miller's second foreshadowed motion. So you move, you wish to speak to that again, or?
No, Your Worship, but I did add a third point to that, was that council members be provided with a copy of the PS Oscar W Conservation Plan and Business Plan, please. And in moving this, I stress again that I do not wish to be taken to be disrespectful towards the Oscar volunteers, the Friends of the Oscar, or anyone. I am just trying to understand the support and the value that they give to us. I mean no disrespect at all. Thank you.
That's fair enough. You need to understand. You need to know all these things. You need to know how it operates and how it works and what it does. It's good to know. So, is there a seconder? Councillor Gardner. Microphone. Any discussion? I'll put that to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. We can move on to 8.2, which is consultation on the expert panel's review of the planning system, and there's a recommendation there that you endorse that. Moved, Councillor Miller. You're moving it?
No, Your Worship, I just had a question going back, to the motion that was lost. My understanding of a lost motion is that it's lost, we didn't make a decision, so there's nothing stopping that from being considered in the annual business plan.
Through the chair, you were correct. A lost motion means that it could come back at a later time. My intention is to put on 5 clear day notice when the mid-year review comes, a recommendation that we do no further work on option B going forward, and that will tell me exactly what to do, and that will cover it off then. So that's how I'll cover it.
And we've got a recommendation here on the planning panel's review. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Coombs.
Sorry, mate. If I can ask the question first, then I might just modify the motion. I've read through the LGA submission as well, which represents all of the councils, and it read pretty good to me. Is there any matters in there that would be contrary to our thinking? Because if not, why don't we include that in the motion, that we also support that submission?
Through the chair, there's nothing contradictory in the LGA submission. I think it's all very complementary, so there wouldn't be an issue in including that if you'd wish to.
Okay, well, could I move the recommendation, but include in there that council admin that we fully support the submission prepared by the LGA in consultation with local councils?
Is there a seconder? Sorry. Repeat that again, Councillor Dennis.
That council also fully supports the submission prepared by the LGA Association in consultation with local councils. What I'm suggesting is that it just reinforces our support for not only the staff's report on this, but that the submission that the Local Government Association made is also supported by us. So it just strengthens our support for the whole thing. And can I just add one, which I should have done at the beginning? I did look very carefully at the report. There's nothing in there that I can see that relates to the Mount Compass Golf Course, because if it did, I would probably need to declare a perceived conflict of interest, given the Ombudsman's investigation last time. And I think not.
Through the chair, there's no specific detail in relation to the Mount Compass Golf Course because that was a recent code amendment that has now been finalised.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Oliver. Any discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to congratulate the staff on the response. It talks about tree canopy, it talks about preservation of historical assets and street trees on new land divisions. I think that's very important. Localised flooding, we make a direct reference to native vegetation and bushfire risk overlays and the conflicting advice that we encounter, I believe. and it talks about character areas and historic assets, and I'm glad we're responding, and yeah, thank you.
Any further discussion? The only thing we did discuss, we have discussed with the LGA, and I've just spoken to Matt about it, is there's no reference to the FPA, amendments to the FPA in here, the food protection area. We've got a couple of properties that we submitted a number of times for a change of land use, and they both, and surprisingly got knocked back. They've been approved by council for a change, but we've been advised that they will be part of the 30-year review which starts this year. So the LGA tried to get some of those changes in as well, but the government said no, we'll do them as part of the 30-year plan review. So I just thought I'd let you know that. All those in favour of that? Against? It's carried unanimously. 8.3 is Lot 5, Hampden Way, Strathalbyn, a code amendment. It's a developer instigated code amendment, not ours. Engagement feedback update, and there's a recommendation there with a couple of options. Councillor Maidman.
And I'll speak to it now. If I'd like to move 1 and 2, the alternative motion that we oppose the code amendment. Okay, can I go now?
Are you speaking to it?
Yep, here I go. So a code amendment initiated by a developer has polarised the Strathalbyn community once again. These code amendments undermine council's long-established strategic planning processes. I have concerns about the impartiality of a community consultation process conducted by a person or developer with a commercial interest in the outcome. Also, council has no opportunity to gauge the community's views on a code amendment until the consultation period is closed. I believe that's the 23rd of this month. Back on December the 19th, a draft letter opposing the change in zoning was provided to us with a brief report on the history of several zone changes to date on that land. This report did not provide all of the historical facts surrounding the land in question. So if you recall from that report, a development plan amendment was requested by the Minister to rezone existing primary production land to a neighbourhood zone. This request was initiated by the owners or developers of the said land. This all took place back in 2017. The proposal galvanised the Strathalbyn community, generating petitions containing in excess of 1,500 signatures and a community-initiated meeting of over 200 people expressing significant concerns about the potential impact of out-of-town retail on existing businesses, and therefore the continued appeal of Strathalbyn to locals and visitors. I often hear that people do not want Strath to be the next Mount Barker. I refer to the Strathalbyn Town Plan 2014 to 24, which determined that new shops and services should be located within the existing district centre zone. The development plan amendment cost council considerable time and money. I've heard figures bandied around of over $200,000, and over 400 public submissions were received. So zoning was ultimately changed from primary production to residential by the Minister in late 2018. In March 2021, the Planning and Design Code replaced the Alexandrina Council's development plan, and in the process replaced the residential zone with the Hills neighbourhood zone. Since that time, we have had approvals for an OTR outlet with 3 fast food franchises attached on a parcel of land nearby. Also across the road, directly across the road from the OTR, is a 24-hour gym, medical centre and 1 other shop in a small-scale shopping precinct currently under construction. A recent application to build premises for a chiropractor was rejected by the Fleurieu Regional Assessment Panel because it did not comply with the neighbourhood zone conditions which are in place at this time. These panel members comprise 4 experienced and independent town planners familiar with the Planning, Infrastructure and Development Act, as well as 1 councillor representing council, that being Yankula and Alexandrina. So if approved, the 4.5 hectare parcel of land proposed in this time me out, will be developed into various commercial pursuits thereby creating an out-of-town retail hub, which is contrary to the Strathalbyn Town Plan recommendations. So yes, 300 allotments have been approved over the past 2 years. That's vacant land. I question the number of houses applications, as I believe there are approximately 60 to 70 houses have been approved, not built, per annum in that time. Strathalbyn already has a health precinct with land sold in High Street, recently purchased for this purpose, so we don't need it out on the northern side of town. This land is within the Central Business District zone and is fit for purpose. Strathalbyn Health Precinct is ideally located adjacent to the existing health providers, hospital and nursing home, and we don't need to create another one. The 2021 census statistics show that Strath population of 7,200, an increase of approximately 1,000 since 2016, or 200 per annum. If we extrapolate that growth out to 2036, our population will be around 10,000, and most of the future residential zoned land and infill will be utilised. We have at least 15 years of land available going to on present projections when the deferred urban land was rezoned residential back last year. So the opposed letter, in my opinion, is reflective of community wishes at this time and is consistent with the letter supplied in the council agenda of the 19th of December. I'm at a loss as to why we are considering to accept the rezoning proposal when a lot of the time and money has been spent already opposing large-scale commercial development at that site. So I'm saying let it remain neighbourhood zone for the time being, as most objections these days relate to the present buildings under construction on that site, spoiling the entrance to town, and more importantly, the fragmentation of retail precinct in Strathalbyn with potential harm to the existing businesses in the centre of town.
Is there a seconder for it? There's no seconder. Councillor Gardner, did you wish to speak to it? Does anybody else wish to speak to it? Councillor Thornton.
I'm on the fence with either way. I live in Strath and I can see both positives and negatives to both sides. Like positives are in future, like we need to think of the future, we probably will need another supermarket. And I see the development that's happening there now. Adding on to that, there's already going to be the diminished view, so adding on to that obviously may make it worse, but it's already there anyway. I also don't see where else something like this could go within the town and still be workable for the town, like it is a good location for a supermarket. But I also worry that if the supermarket that plans to go there, that deal falls through, then what will be put there worries me.
Any further discussion on Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Worship. When this came to Council's December meeting, I commented that given our role as Council members is representative decision making, and it was my experience that there are people in the community who are supportive of this proposed code amendment, then perhaps for balance officers could give consideration to a recommendation to the Chamber to give qualified support to the code amendment, or at the very least not oppose it. That is, what would it take for Council to not oppose the code amendment or offer qualified support? I thank the CEO and planning staff very much for giving the Chamber the opportunity to consider both sides of the argument. It's usually easier to say no to something, and the tension and unknowns created by saying yes, I acknowledge. I completely understand the town centre business community being nervous, but there's the flip side. This code amendment may lead to opportunities in terms of employment, particularly for our young people, business expansion, innovation, competition, which can assist to keep cost of living pressures lower, investment in community facilities. The list goes on for our growing community and changing demographic, and this should not be underestimated. We've just made a decision at item 8.1 that puts us in new territory when it comes to borrowings. Part of managing just the interest payments alone will be the need to grow our rate base, commercially and residentially. We are in many ways therefore fortunate we have growth. Forecast to be 1.3 I think, but as I understand it actually sitting around 2%. I'm not 100% don't know those numbers. We must now look to innovative private investment opportunities that will drive our economy. We must encourage interpretation of information and legislation, not as a constraint, but as enabling of what's possible. How else would this area be activated with the trails and employment opportunities and visual amenity beyond houses? We risk a dormant suburb and more urban sprawl without any placemaking activating development. I hope there will be allied health services, walkable communities, and I believe this will complement and preserve the historic elements of our town centre. I mean, the ultimate decision rests with the Minister, and I draw your attention to the responses to my question on notice at item 5.7. And the officer's report talks about why we should actually support this, well, not support this one, but supporting the code amendment. And I ask you to vote against what Councillor Maidment has just proposed, and I foreshadow that in the event that happens, that we will submit attachment letter 2. Thank you.
Councillor Coomans is next.
Thanks, Mayor Parks, and I can smell dinner. But we're going to be here for a while, I think. Look, I certainly respect Councillor Maidment's comments, and he's been very consistent over the years in terms of support for the current centralised business area. But I'm sort of mindful of one of the things he has been pushing is for extra parking, so that seems to be a big issue in the centre of town. But looking at this area, it seems to me that it's an ideal location for these sorts of things. We already have a skate park, council's one. There's tennis courts. There's a motel on the run being built. There's a health precinct. It probably needs some sporting facilities like a gymnasium or a basketball stadium or some specialty shops. And then I look at the positives. It allows for an anchor tenant like a supermarket. It is central to Strath. Well, it's not that far from Strath. It's well located to main and collector roads, and it certainly is. There's sufficient. It appears that there is sufficient demand, and the addition to this 300 allotments over the past 2 years. And in terms of the chiropractor, I attended the FRAP meeting, and the sense I got out of that was that the reason they declined was that because of the zoning, and if the zoning was changed to complement these sorts of things, I think that they would have supported it. And so with a code amendment, and if it is amended to that, it means that things like the chiropractor and a supermarket will be possible in that area, and it's really part of the growth of any town. A bit of decentralisation. It happens in a lot of other places. It's not something I want to see encompassed, by the way, because we're not big enough for that. But I think you're big enough and mean enough in Strath that probably this is what's needed. And I come from this, not that I have any bias, but I do have a little bit of planning background, and I am the council's representative on the FRAP from July. Thank you.
Councillor Courtney Thornton.
When we were briefed on this back in December, we were told that some more information would come about from the people who were investigating in terms of whether more community members had come forward and said their opinion. Do we have any of those?
We do. Through the chair, we've been provided with an update as of this morning. Currently, there have been 42 submissions in relation to the code amendment. 14 of those support it unqualified. There are 25 opposed to the proposal, and there are 3 that are undecided. But also note that of the 25 that are opposed, one of them has stated quite strongly that they are only opposed to it because they think it should be bigger and it should allow for more retail. So 42 submissions in a town of 7,200 or 8,000 if you count the latest census, the broader Strathalbyn region, I would suggest is a very low number of respondents at this point of time.
Any further discussion on this item? So put Councillor Maidment, you want to write a reply as well? Yep.
So I've got all counter arguments for everything that you've all proposed, and the fact that we've only had 40 something submissions through the developers initiated consultation, that doesn't take into consideration the amount of emails that were asked to be directed to the Minister. And so there'll be a raft of emails from various people around town that will go there. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that it's a very polarising subject. I definitely have been pushing the line for the business community. Someone talked about car parking. Well, that's underway at the moment. We're getting more car parks in Strath as we speak. They're under construction right now, so that's not an argument. The chiropractor, yeah, it was a chiropractor relocating out of the main street out to that particular spot. And as I said before, the comments I get around town is we don't want to be like Mount Barker, we don't want decentralised shopping areas. Where the growth is occurring now is more to the south, which is way away from the proposed shopping centre with Higginbotham's almost 250 allotments that they have got planned. And I feel that we're going against all the work that's been done for the Strathalbyn town plan and all the strategic plans we've put in place. The developer initially wanted neighbourhood zone, he got it, and now he wants to push the goalposts out again, and I suppose that's his prerogative. Got no qualms about that. It's just that I think that the voice for no has to be heard.
That closes the debate, so I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? We're talking about one and the alternative motion. So one, we're noting it and taking the alternative motion to oppose, which is attachment 1. Yep. So that's what we've been talking about. So I'll put that to you. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. We go to 8.4 is a project using waste matter as a circular economy and housing infrastructure initiative. There's a recommendation there. Is there a mover for that? Two things. You haven't got your microphone on.
Sorry, getting late. I'm just alerting you to the fact that I'm on the board of the Adelaide Hills Regional Waste Authority, and this is involving or potentially involving the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority, although it does say other constituent partner councils, but I'm just alerting you to that point, that's all.
So you're declaring a general conflict of interest, and how are you going to handle it?
I will refrain from voting.
Okay. That's right. So we've got a recommendation there as a mover. Councillor Coomans?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to move the recommendation. I think this really has the potential of utilising material that can be recycled and incorporated into cement, and then utilising a three-dimensional gantry printer constructed into walling and then a home. I see it as a win-win for me, especially if we do as a consortium with other councils on the Fleurieu. I think both our Climate Emergency Action Committee and the former Environmental Committee, the Section 41 committees, would fully support such a venture. And in terms of affordable homes and the current cost increase with timber, steel and plastic, I think this is a good move, so I fully support it.
Councillor Gardner, you wish to second it?
Yes, Your Worship, and I endorse what Councillor Koeman says. Any recycling of building materials sounds like an excellent idea.
Any further discussion? Put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? Anybody against? It's carried unanimously. Councillor Scott's not there. 8.5 is the lease and licence policy activities, October to December 2022, the quarterly report, and it's just a number of leases and licences that are up for renewal. Is there a mover for that?
So moved.
Councillor Scott. there a seconder? Councillor Gardner. Any discussion? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. .6 is the proposed nomination of Councillor Lou Nicholson to the South Australian Public Health Council.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to declare an actual conflict of interest as the position is a paid position, so I'll step out of the chamber for discussion and vote.
So, Councillor Cummins, you're moving it?
Happy to move it, Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Scott. Is there any discussion? Shouldn't be. I put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Can we get Lou back? So we're up to item 8.7, which is the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority first quarter budget review for 22 to 23, and there's a recommendation that we receive it, noting no changes to Council's contribution. Move to Councillor Thornton. Seconder, sorry? Miller? Is it any discussion? Hang on, just one minute. Just 1 minute, seconding it, then you put your hand down. I can't tell whether you've done it or not. So who wants to speak? Could you actually speak to it, Councillor Miller?
In seconding it, I wanted to just add some words that it is, in the conclusion is actually the motion, what the motion says, but it doesn't include with an operating deficit of 742,083, an estimated cash at end of reporting period as 627,635. I just thought it might be useful for the community to see that in the, with leave of the mover, just to include those words.
Thornton, you happy? Councillor Oliver, you wish to speak?
Thank you. Just a financial comment. We need to do something about these numbers. This performance is totally unacceptable. Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Cummins?
I have a question to ask, and I guess the question is, when do we expect some sort of presentation from the Aquatic Centre people? Because I just have, in terms of they've got a surplus at the moment, and there's some things that I'd like to ask them about what they're doing about it. I could put the question now, but it's sort of not relevant to what the subject matter is.
Through the chair, we can request that they come along and do a presentation. We're doing that with Ferrara, so we can request the same thing from Fracca, and I'll do that for you.
I think it would be beneficial because, you know, the comment just raised about their operations and, you know, it's costing us an arm and a leg, but they do have cash of $628,000, so I've got a good use for that.
Any further discussion? So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. So 8.8 is a confidential order review. There are, it goes through to item to 2, through to 1.12 through to 2, and it's just a number of items that are in competence that are to be retained in competence. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Gardner. Seconder, Councillor Scott. Any discussion? Put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. 8.9 is a code of conduct Ombudsman's investigation report regarding Councillor Bronwyn Lewis when she was a councillor. I'll just advise the purpose of this report is purely to do as the Ombudsman's requested, to present it to Council, that we receive it. Move to Councillor Maidment. Seconder. Is there a seconder? Councillor Scott. You want to speak to it, or what are you doing? I don't know what, I can't understand what you're trying to do.
Yes, as a seconder, I'll just make a comment if I may. I spent the whole of last council term, virtually nearly all of it, as a co-councillor, and I provided, I tried to act in a collegiate manner and work constructively and amicably with the councillor. At times I guess I pushed the boundary a bit in some of the areas that I went in to support, because I was keen to have a good working and amicable chamber. I'm saddened by where we've finished up, and I am deeply offended.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Yeah, look, I've got to speak about this one because I did raise some texts and things with the CEO when this was first on the agenda on Thursday night, and I guess I was amazed that it was a letter from the Ombudsman to you, and you represent council, and I expected that it would come to council for a decision in terms of that report being made public. It wasn't. It was on the agenda on Thursday night, so I texted the CEO and brought that to his attention, but it seems like everything's in order, but I just feel so uncomfortable that the Ombudsman has made a recommendation that it may be made public. He could do it if he wanted to. He could do it subject to us doing it first, and he could then also do it. He's already written to the Minister and he's advised the former councillor. What really peeves me is that he is recommending that this council make this report public. So, in my view, it's the council that should then be making the decision about it being made public. Now, to put the guts of the report on tonight's agenda is fine, but his letter, which contains all of the investigation, should have, in my view, should be a decision of this council to release it. Now, we could have adopted this report tonight and then either agreed for it to be released or not agreed. If we didn't agree for it to be released, then we would need to go back to the Ombudsman and then say to him that the council didn't release the report, but for very good reason. And the very good reason is we've just gone through 4 years of a dysfunctional council with multiple codes of conduct. A couple of elected members were probably the main driver, and the target was the former member. And we, as a new council, have decided that we're not going to have any of that. You know, we're going to have respectful discussions, we're going to have respectful debates. We might disagree, that's fine, and we have tonight, but none of us are looking at each other as if we're going to kill each other. So what this has actually done now, it's now going to probably be a headline in some of the papers, and it'll just stir the whole damn thing up again, when really there was no need for that to happen. If we'd considered this as a council, which I think we should have, I think there was very wrong that it was put on the public agenda, and this could have been dealt with, it would have gone away, and we could move on and actually start working as a council that we are working like now. We've just regurgitated the whole thing again, and I think that's very sad.
Nigel might want to say something, but I will for the first. First, I'll tell you now, it gives to all of you, it gives me no pleasure to see this item on the agenda. It's history. Then we have a direction from the Ombudsman that it be go to council within 2 public meetings. The Ombudsman also advised that once we have advised him it has been to this meeting and been made public, he will then make it public himself also. It's not a thing we can decide what to do. I don't get, and you don't get, to decide whether you'd carry out the Ombudsman's instructions or not. And I'm happy to debate that with the Ombudsman, but I'm doing what the Ombudsman's told me to do, and so is Nigel as far as I'm concerned. Nigel, do you want to speak to us? Well, no, that's how it is, and that's why I just wanted it to be received and gone, not talked about and carried on.
Mayor Parks, I do need to raise a point of order, because the point of order is the Ombudsman's letter. And if you read the letter, nowhere in it does he say, I direct you to do what you've just said. He says, let me read what it says here. I've concluded my investigations, and the purpose of this letter is to provide you with the final views about the matter. They are set out in the enclosed report. I've sent a copy to you, but and I'm just looking for the word where he says here, my report has included a recommendation, not a direction, a recommendation that the council provide a copy of my report to a public meeting of the council within 2 ordinary meetings of the council. Until the council has caused a copy of my report to be provided at a public meeting, I advise that my report is confidential. So he was waiting for us to make it public, and he would then decide whether he would make his public. Nowhere in that letter from him does he say you are directed to make it public. And I know we've talked about this before, where we've said if the Ombudsman makes a recommendation, you take his recommendation. But I think in this case there are special circumstances in terms of the way that this council now operates. It's a brand new council. It's not the old. And I think all we're doing is just stirring up what we shouldn't have stirred up.
So all we're doing is done what we've always done, and always will do, is following the Ombudsman's recommendation. If you want to drag the council into a conflict with the Ombudsman, be my guest, but don't take this council with you. 8.10 is the Chief Executive... Oh, sorry, hang on. Lost that somewhere. Is there any further discussion first? Hopefully not. So I've put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? Anybody against? It's carried unanimously. 8.10 is the Chief Executive Officer's report. There's a recommendation that the report be received. Move, Councillor Livingston. Seconder, Councillor Maidment, sorry. Any questions or discussion relating to Nigel's report? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much. I just have some comments around the major projects report. We've made some tough decisions tonight around the Wharf, and makes it imperative that we manage our every major project going forward very well. I just want to comment that I hope our risk registers are clearly articulated for every one of these projects, and in the context of the contingency to the Wharf and our precarious net financial liabilities ratio, this report is now exceptionally important and of interest. I like it that we have green and red, but I would like to suggest, and it's just a suggestion, that perhaps we can have a bit more insight and commentary from the CEO around issues and risks and the response to those, and just a general commentary about the status of the program and whether we're on track to deliver it, what the forecast is for the next 5 months perhaps, and where we might be at risk, and maybe a bit of a heat map. And this is during the week I circulated comments from Infrastructure SA's report and about just the risks to major projects generally across the state. So I'd just like to see, I think it's a great report, but it's really hard to make connections sometimes between what's in the annual business plan, what's on this report, and what's renewals and what's acquisitions, and maybe I don't want to ask for too much more information, but I just think we could make the commentary a little bit more meaningful to all of us. But I do love this report. I like seeing it every meeting. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Councillor Maidment.
Just to follow on from that, this relates to projects as well. The corporate systems implementation of 2.3 million in the current budget. So, will you be giving us a report on the review to this chamber? Because apparently it appears there's some challenges there. 65,000 was allocated to Goolwa Rowing Club. They don't want it at the present time, so I'd just like to know where that's gone. There was the regional signage program. We had the DA for two new entry signs, which was lodged. There are 11 signs for replacement, so I'd like to know where they're all going. Are they all being spread around the district? Schofield's fire track, when was that completed? It says it was completed. I don't know if it has been. And the dog park's been deferred under whose instruction? And because apparently you need to further communicate with elected members. Now the Sutter Street Bridge is interesting. The painting's been completed. Pity the underside of the bridge wasn't, nor the lights refurbished. That is cleaning the glass on the light poles on the bridge. Probably an oversight. And I'll leave all the rest. Yeah.
Through the chair, I'll answer some of them in no particular order as they come back to me. Yep. The first one is the dog park. The dog park was subject to additional funding being received. Additional funding hasn't been received, and therefore the money hasn't been allocated to it, so it needs to be deferred. As far as the, I think it was the Aquatic, the 65,000 that you're talking about?
The rowing club,
yeah. We'll bring that back at the mid-year review to see what we need to do with that. The corporate systems that we're doing a real good look at that. I will bring that back to council, and I will probably do that in a confidential briefing just to talk about where we're at, where the staff is at with it, and what problems we're experiencing with it, and the way forward. That's probably going to be a lengthy conversation. It has a major impact on the organisation, so elected members need to know about it, and I will provide a copy of that report. The bridge funding side of things with the painting, we did what was budgeted for, and that has now been delivered. If with the fire track, it talked about that it's been completed, and I will be able to get a completion date on that, unless Mr. Baker wanted to add something straight in. No, we'll just get back to you and let you know when that's done. I think I've hit most of them.
Yeah, you covered it well. Oh, the regional signage program.
The regional signage program, we have got all the signs defined, where they're going to go. This is a lot of the, as you're coming in, and I'll give you an update on that one. It's nearly ready to go, and I'm pretty confident that we're still going to spend the money in this financial year.
Any Councillor Coomans?
Sorry, on the regional signage, did you settle on a final in terms of what the message actually will be?
Through the chair, we have. I just can't quote it straight off. I think what you're asking for is the native title messaging on it. Is that what you're asking for? Yeah, we will get that back. I think it's probably timely that I send that out in a portal to just give an update on that project, and I'm sure Mr. Atkinson is.
And could I add, Mayor Parks, that the compliments for the project update, it's got a lot of information in there. It could have more, but it's you can almost think about putting a traffic light system in there as well, so that we can at a glance see where things are at.
Councillor Miller, I just wanted to respond about the report, and as you're saying it all, I'm thinking I would love to do that, but at the same time it's very time consuming to do that. What this report is designed to do is to give you a prompt. Anything that you're comfortable with, anything that you want more information on, do that. I think when we highlight something, as soon as it's got a big red mark, that's the reason why our eyes need to go there. And that's why we'll give a lot more detail on those ones where we do think there's challenges. So I will enhance the ones where they're on challenges, especially if they're that big dark red, but I'm not looking at doing wholesale changes. As far as the risk register goes, we have a consultant that's coming in to run the elected members through risk, and he's also going to be spending some time with the exec team to get our risk register more up to date. I don't think it's probably at the level that it needs to be, and more needs to be done, but on every individual project we do have risk registers that we also follow as well. I'm talking more along the lines of we need to do some more strategic risk register side of things. So we'll enhance the report, but probably not to the level that you're asking for.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Mayor. Nigel, I'd like to thank you for your report, and I'd like to acknowledge the significant demands and hours required of you over the last month. The Middleton floods, the high flows down the river, the Wharf report, Christmas and New Year, a significant time for family, everything else, including all-nighters. There's not much more to say, but thank you to you and your family who have given you a lot to us over the last month, so thank you. And the team, of course.
Any further? So I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 9 is council member reports. 9.1 is mayor's report. There's a recommendation that that report be received. Moved Councillor Oliver. Seconded Councillor Gardner. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Scott.
Update?
No. If you were you've got to stay with us. We're
Sorry.
at the mayor's report, receiving the report. So, are there any questions or anything? No. I'll just advise you that I've got a notification, I think on Thursday or Friday, that I've been appointed to the Hills and Fleurieu our Landscape Board. That's a ministerial appointment. It's not something I applied for. I was asked to, but I put my hand up. So it was pretty good to get that. So I'm quite happy with that. Apart from that, everything else is fine. So I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. I must say, I'm off of every other board and committee I was on, so I was tempted not to go on any, but this one was tempting, so it was too good. 9.2 is the council member activity report. We've got a report from Councillor Gardner. And Councillor Gardner, did you wish to leave an absence?
No, I don't. I just want to say, Your Worship, that right down the bottom it says November and it's actually December. So
oh yeah.
November comes before December, and that was actually the last little bit of December.
And Nigel says you wish to apply for a leave of absence.
Oh, yes, I do.
So do you wish to do it as part of this, so we can put it with the report?
So would you like me to do that now, Your Worship? Yes, I'm applying for leave of absence for a period of 6 months. 6 months would be good. No, 6 weeks. I probably won't need all that, but I'm having both my knees replaced on Thursday, and I know it's going to be 5 hours of surgery. So I might not be walking really well for a couple of weeks.
We'll move that separately as part of this report. So is there a mover that we accept that? Move Councillor Maidment. Seconded Councillor Miller. In no discussion, I'll just put that to you. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. And we come back to the members' report. So there's an activity report there from Councillor Gardner. Are there any elected members' verbal updates? No. Councillor Scott.
Yes, I noticed it was mentioned in the CEO's report, and it was regarding the carols at Port Elliot. And I just make a general statement that, and that's very unfortunate, but it made me think that with these events, particularly where we do provide community grants and that sort of thing, that there probably should be a backup plan. That event could easily have been held at the showgrounds and could have gone ahead with some prior planning, and if, you know, that if there's inclement weather, what's our option? And unfortunately the whole thing was very unfortunate, and the provider of the sound equipment had stayed back from a trip to somewhere, Bali I think, to help them with that night, and it all fizzled, and of course everybody just had to go home. So I just wonder whether next year we could build into it that you know, we've got Christmas where the Angus flows, we've got other things that occur, and particularly where we provide grant money, that perhaps we look at a possible backup plan.
Anything else from anybody? Councillor Coomans?
Sorry, Mayor Park, just a quick one. I and a lot of members here attended that Malane flood presentation, and it was very well attended. I just want to acknowledge our General Manager, Andy Baker, who must be commended for his excellent presentation and the honest way in which he provided the facts of the situation. By far the best presenter, I thought, and 2 state parliamentarians attended as well. It was a very worthwhile meeting.
Anything else from anybody? So we need a mover that the reports be received. Moved Councillor Oliver. Seconder Councillor Scott. Put that to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. We now move into item 10, which is confidential items.
South Coast Television, your community, your voice.